Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world far more frightening than any haunted castle, plague-ridden village, or medieval battlefield. A place so treacherous, so exhausting, so wildly underappreciated that most of us wouldn't last 10 minutes, much less a full day. Tonight, we're talking about the 1950s American housewife, a woman who woke up each morning ready to fight chaos armed with nothing but aqua net, gelatin-based salads, and the crushing weight of societal expectations. Before we dive in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy hanging out here at 2 a.m, listening to a stranger talk about historical suffering. And thank you for suggesting this topic, by the way. You have impeccable taste in oddly specific misery. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you're currently wearing pants. No judgment. This is a pants-optional zone. Alright, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that gentle, white noise. Get comfortable. Tuck your feet under a blanket so the imaginary mid-century dust bunnies can't nibble your toes. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever asked yourself what it was really like to maintain a spotless home using cleaning products strong enough to peel paint off a Buick? Did women genuinely smile while vacuuming in high heels, or were their souls quietly leaving their bodies? How many casseroles can one human being physically produce before crying into a bowl of condensed soup? Were Tupperware parties actually fun, or were they just multi-level marketing purgatory with better snacks? Could you survive a single afternoon with a 1950s washing machine that weighed as much as a small horse and tried to electrocute you if you looked at it funny? Would you last a day as a 1950s housewife? Or would you tap out during your first Jell-O salad? Because now congratulations, you've just woken up in 1954, you're wearing an apron you don't remember putting on, you smell faintly of lemon polish, and you have exactly 1 hour to turn your entire home into something that looks like it belongs in a magazine before anyone judges you for existing. Good luck, superstar. You wake up before the sun, before the kids, and before your husband, who somehow sleeps like a tranquilized ox. Your day begins with the 1950s housewife's first challenge, getting out of bed without making a single sound. Because if one child wakes up early, everyone wakes up early, and then the chaos clock starts ticking faster than your patience. The room is still dark, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp outside, the kind that flickers like it's questioning its own life choices. Your feet hit the floor with the gentle precision of a burglar avoiding a tripwire. Even the bed springs cooperate for once, whispering instead of shrieking their usual metallic protest. You take a slow breath, inhaling that familiar morning cocktail of cold air, stale perfume, and the faint lingering aroma of yesterday's overcooked pot roast. That's the thing about the 1950s. Even the smells seem to stick around out of obligation. You move through the bedroom like a spy. Every step is a negotiation. The wooden floorboards creak if you shift your weight even a millimetre too far to the left, and the doorknob has betrayed you so many times you treat it like an active enemy soldier. You finally make it to the hallway, only to freeze in place because you hear something a sniff. Or maybe it's just the radiator. The line between child stirring and old plumbing complaining grows thinner by the day. Once you're certain the tiny dictators remain asleep, you proceed toward the kitchen. This is where the real mission begins. The 1950s kitchen is a battlefield disguised in pastel. Every surface gleams, or is supposed to, and your appliances sit in a silent row like overconfident troops ready to test your sanity. The refrigerator hums loudly, the oven clicks for no reason, and the toaster glares at you as if daring you to lower your guard. You flip on the lights with the delicacy of someone disarming a bomb. The first task of the morning, coffee. Weak, burnt, reliable coffee from a percolator that sounds like it's boiling its own thoughts. You drink it anyway, because you must. Caffeine is the closest thing you have to divine intervention. As you wait for it to brew, You mentally run through the day's schedule: breakfast before the kids revolt, laundry before the sun rises too high, ironing before your husband notices his shirts are wrinkled, and vacuuming before anyone realizes you haven't sat down since 1947. You glance at the clock, 6:07 a.m., only 7 minutes into your day, and you've already accomplished more stealth maneuvers than a Cold War spy. You take your first sip of coffee and savor it like it's the last good thing that will happen to you today. But then the floorboards upstairs creak. A child, yours, is awake. You can feel it in your bones. The pitter-patter of small feet becomes increasingly frantic, like a squirrel discovering yoga. You brace yourself as your youngest appears in the doorway, hair in disarray, clutching a stuffed animal that's seen better decades. They blink up at you with sleepy confusion, as though surprised the world exists before dawn. You gently shush them, praying your voice doesn't trigger the others. One wrong syllable, and your morning transforms from silent strategy to full-scale domestic warfare. Because once one kid is awake, the others awaken through a mysterious sibling telepathy, the same force that enables them to collectively scream over nothing during dinner. Your husband remains fast asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware. He'll descend in an hour, stretching leisurely, asking why the coffee tastes a little off today. You smile through gritted teeth, wondering if courts in the 1950s allowed temporary insanity pleas based on excessive domestic labour. Still, you carry on. The kitchen warms, the coffee kicks in, and the sun begins to rise in a soft golden wash through the curtained window. And for a brief, fleeting moment, before the breakfast chaos begins, you feel powerful, capable, like you've taken the first hill in a long battle and lived to tell the tale. Because in the 1950s, waking up at 6 a.m. isn't just part of the routine, it's survival. And you're already winning. It's time to cook breakfast for a family of 4 using ingredients that modern nutritionists would consider a threat. You juggle frying pans, coffee percolators, and a husband asking where his tie is, all while pretending you did not, in fact, sleep 4 hours total. The kitchen springs to life like a one-woman Broadway show, except no one bought tickets, and your only applause comes in the form of someone asking for more bacon. The air is already thick with the unmistakable perfume of sizzling grease, a scent that clings to your apron, your curtains, and possibly your very soul. Your frying pan crackles like it's auditioning for a radio drama, and that faint popping noise probably means a fire hazard, but you ignore it because breakfast waits for no one. You whisk pancake batter with the confidence of someone who hasn't questioned her life choices in at least 5 minutes. The batter is thick, lumpy, and somehow both too runny and too dry, a miracle unique to the 1950s. Behind you, the percolator coughs and sputters like a tiny, overworked steam engine. You pray it doesn't explode. It's done that once before. Meanwhile, your husband wanders through the kitchen like a lost tourist in his own home. He asks where his other shoe is. He asks if his blue tie is clean. He asks if maybe breakfast could be ready a little sooner because he has a meeting. You answer him with a tone so serene it belongs in a monastery despite the internal scream rising like a kettle about to burst. "Of course, dear," you say, while flipping pancakes with the reflexes of a trained martial artist. The first few flop onto the plate, pale, uneven, and slightly tragic. But that's okay. You serve those to the kids. They won't notice. Kids never notice unless it's something you want them to notice. One child bursts into the kitchen announcing that the dog ate a sock. The other arrives crying because the first child stole their crayon. The dog strolls in looking proud, as if this sock belongs to his personal memoir. You try to manage all of this while opening the oven with your foot to check if the toast has burned yet. It has. Still, you press on. This breakfast must happen. It is the immovable cornerstone of 1950s domestic life. Hot food served promptly, efficiently, and cheerfully. Even when the only thing cheerful about you is the forced upward angle of your eyebrows, the bacon spits, aggressively, sending a tiny droplet of molten fat directly onto your wrist. You don't flinch. You've moved past the stage of reacting to pain. Your nerves filed for resignation years ago. You slide the bacon onto a plate lined with paper towels, because that's what the magazines say looks tidy, even though the towels instantly become transparent like they've given up. You assemble the plates, pancakes stacked like an architectural project, bacon arranged with military precision, eggs shaped in ways eggs were never meant to be shaped. The kids complain there's syrup on the wrong side of the pancake. Your husband says the coffee tastes different. You inhale through your nose and imagine briefly what life might be like in a quiet cottage somewhere far, far away, maybe Canada. But despite everything, the chaos, the exhaustion, the questionable ingredients, there's a strange sort of rhythm to it all, a cozy kind of choreography. You hand out plates like a seasoned commander distributing rations to troops preparing for battle. For one fleeting moment, the family is seated, quiet, eating. You did it. You created order out of morning madness. You take a sip of your own coffee, lukewarm, bitter, slightly metallic, and let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Breakfast is served. Breakfast is happening. Breakfast will be over soon. And like every 1950s housewife who came before you, you savour this 15-second window of peace before the dishes begin their sinister clatter in the sink. Armed with a mop, sponge and cleaning chemicals banned in 17 countries today, you begin the sacred ritual of scrubbing every surface before 9 a.m. Because in the 1950s, dust wasn't just dust, it was a moral failing. You start in the kitchen, where the linoleum floor stares back at you like a disappointed parent. The magazines promise that a quick daily wipe will keep everything sparkling, but you know better. Quick wipe in a 1950s kitchen is like whispering good luck into a tornado. You fill a bucket with hot water and a cleaning powder so strong that if you breathe too deeply, you might astral project. The mop handle creaks in your hands as you begin the rhythmic back-and-forth dance you've perfected through sheer survival. The smell of bleach and lemon-scented hope fills the room. Your hands tingle, partly from the chemicals and partly from the early morning adrenaline that comes from knowing guests could appear at any moment. People just drop by back then, no warnings, no texts, not even a polite knock sometimes. Just a smiling neighbour barging in to borrow sugar and silently judge your bookshelf. You scrub the counters until they shine with a blinding glow, the kind that says, "Yes, Margaret from down the street, my kitchen is clean enough to prepare open-heart surgery in." You wipe down the stove, removing every microscopic splatter of bacon fat as if your social reputation depends on it, because it absolutely does. Then comes the living room. Ah yes, the arena of visible surfaces. Every magazine, lamp, cushion and decorative ceramic animal must be positioned with the strategic precision of a museum exhibit. You dust the shelves using a feather duster that moves like a passive-aggressive peacock. Each sweep lifts a tiny cloud of particles that sparkle briefly in the sunlight before settling back down like they're mocking you. You vacuum next, or rather, you engage in hand-to-machine combat with the 40-pound vacuum cleaner that huffs across the carpet like a tired bison. Its metal body heats up as though it's contemplating spontaneous combustion. You push it back and forth, a steady march that makes you question every decision that has led you to this moment. The cord tangles around your ankles, catching you like the world's saddest trap, and you briefly wonder whether the vacuum is actively conspiring against you. Then there's polishing. Because yes, in the 1950s, every piece of wood furniture must gleam like it's been dipped in honey. You grab the polish, shake the bottle, and immediately regret shaking the bottle because it sprays everywhere. The scent is overpowering. Part citrus, part chemical warfare. You rub it across end tables, dressers, and that one chair no one is allowed to sit in. The finish glows so brightly you could probably signal aircraft with it. But the true test awaits. The bathroom. You enter the battlefield clad only in courage and rubber gloves. The tiles taunt you. The tub glares. The mirror holds the ghost of toothpaste splatter from yesterday's rushed brushing session. You scrub the sink until it squeaks in protest. Each circular motion a reminder that germs were considered an enemy of the state during this era. The toilet gets a full military-grade cleaning regimen. It sparkles in a way that feels deeply unnatural. By the time you reach the hallway, your hair is frizzy, your apron is splattered, and your arms feel like you've been competing in medieval jousting rather than housework. You do one final sweep, literally and metaphorically, checking for anything out of place. A toy car goes back in the toy box. A shoe returns to the shoe rack. A magazine gets straightened by 2 millimeters because yes, someone will notice. And finally, at 8:59 a.m., you stand in the middle of your immaculate home, exhausted but victorious. You have conquered dust. You have defeated grime. You have wrestled chaos into submission. Unfortunately, your children are now awake, and they're carrying jam. Your washing machine is a hissing metal beast that sounds like a jet engine and behaves like it resents its own existence. Every load is a gamble. Will it wash the clothes or eat them? You approach it with the caution of someone defusing a bomb. The machine sits in the corner of the laundry room, which is really just a poorly lit basement with one window that hasn't opened since the Truman administration. The washer's lid rattles as if it's trying to communicate. You aren't fluent in appliance anger, but you're pretty sure it's telling you to run. Still, laundry must be done. Always, perpetually, eternally. It is the Sisyphean task of the 1950s housewife. Roll the boulder of dirty clothes up the hill, watch them come tumbling back down covered in grass stains, chocolate fingerprints, and the mysterious sticky residue children produce without explanation. You sort the laundry into piles, whites, colours, delicates, and the I'm scared to look at these pile. Your husband's shirts need starch. Your children's socks need divine intervention. The towels smell faintly of basement despair. You take a deep breath and begin feeding clothes into the washer like sacrifices. The machine lets out a low groan as it fills with water, a sound so ominous you momentarily wonder if you've awakened something ancient. The water level rises, the clothes begin to churn, and the machine shakes so violently it threatens to migrate across the floor. You plant a firm hand on its metal carcass, like a rancher soothing a panicked horse. Then comes the spin cycle. Oh yes, the spin cycle. A violent, unpredictable force that could easily power a small aircraft. The washer shrieks, whirs and bucks like it's possessed by the vengeful spirit of laundry past. The floor vibrates beneath your feet. Dust drifts from the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance a car alarm goes off. You whisper, "Just one load. Please survive one load." Meanwhile, you turn to the ironing board, the second torture device in your domestic arsenal. Clothes emerge from the washer, twisted into shapes defying known geometry. You iron each shirt with the focus of a surgeon, smoothing wrinkles while avoiding the cord that tries to trip you every 4 minutes. The iron's metal plate radiates heat like a miniature sun, leaving a faint burn on your wrist that you do not react to because you have become immune to pain. And then there's line drying, because sometimes the dryer simply refuses to cooperate, or worse, didn't exist yet. You head outside to hang clothes in the yard where the sun is gentle and the breeze is polite, unless it's one of those days when Mother Nature wakes up and chooses chaos. You pin shirts, dresses and sheets to the line with wooden clothespins that your grandmother swears are better made than modern junk, even though 2 of them snap before you finish the first sheet. The wind picks up. Your laundry tries to escape like it's participating in a prison break. You chase a flapping pillowcase across the lawn. stepping on a rogue Lego your child left behind, experiencing a level of pain that rearranges your DNA. You return inside to check on the washer, which has now stopped mid-cycle. Not finished, just stopped. Completely. Silent in the most unsettling way. You lift the lid, half expecting to find a portal to another dimension, but instead you're greeted by sopping wet clothes that weigh more than your firstborn. You wring them out by hand. Because of course you do. Because in this era, domestic hardship is considered character building. As you place the heavy, dripping garments in a basket, you reflect, not on the beauty of homemaking, but on the fact that every single person in your family seems to wear 3 outfits a day for reasons science cannot explain. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Another load, another battle, another negotiation with the machine that could end in clean shirts or catastrophic failure. Laundry never sleeps, and unfortunately neither do you. You try calling a friend for support only to realise that everyone shares the same party line, and 3 neighbours are already listening in, silently judging your casserole failures. The party line is the 1950s version of social media, except instead of anonymous strangers judging you from afar, it's your literal neighbours breathing directly into your ear. You lift the receiver, hear a faint click, and pause. Are they there? Of course they're there. They're always there. Mrs. Henderson from across the street clears her throat, the universal signal for "Go on, dear, I'm already invested." Someone else, probably Mildred with the overly aggressive begonias, inhales sharply like she's about to weigh in. You speak anyway, because you need human connection, a small lifeline, a scrap of empathy in a day filled with appliances plotting against you. You ask your friend, "How's your morning going?" And immediately Mrs. Boyd whispers, "Terrible," if she's using that dreadful pie crust again. Your eyelid twitches. You pretend you didn't hear it. You pretend this is fine. The phone cord stretches across the kitchen like a long plastic snake that delights in tripping you. You switch the receiver to your other shoulder, expertly dodging the boiling pot of oatmeal while wiping pancake batter off the counter with your elbow. The multitasking is Olympic level at this point. If real medals were awarded for managing chaos while maintaining a polite tone, you'd be on a cereal box. Your friend finally responds, her voice cutting through the static. She's exhausted too, which comforts you in a deeply petty way. Misery may love company, but 1950s housewives depended on it. You whisper conspiratorially, "I burned the toast 3 times," and before she can respond, Mrs. Henderson gently mutters, "Oh, a sweetheart again?" You grip the receiver with the kind of force normally reserved for lifting automobiles off trapped children. You take a calming breath because emotional outbursts travel beautifully on party lines. While you attempt to share the story of your morning meltdown, the children begin reenacting a dramatic opera in the living room. One screams, one collapses, something breaks, the dog barks as though reporting the incident. Every sound echoes through the line. You imagine Mildred taking notes for her afternoon gossip session. You move to the hallway for privacy, a fool's hope. The phone cord drags behind you like the train of a very unfortunate wedding gown. You wrap it around your arm, creating a pretzel of plastic loops that you will spend 10 minutes detangling later. "Have you tried adding more butter to your casserole?" your friend asks. It is the 1950s solution to every problem. Too dry? Butter. Too salty? Butter. Marriage falling apart? More butter. Before you can reply, another neighbour chimes in. "I've always said butter is optional, but proper seasoning is." You slam the receiver against your shoulder to muffle your involuntary groan. You consider hanging up, but hanging up means admitting defeat. It means walking away from your singular lifeline to adulthood. So instead, you pivot, literally, because the cord is now wrapped around your waist, and whisper your darkest truth. "I think I hate cooking casseroles." There's a sharp gasp from the other end. Mrs. Boyd drops her embroidery hoop. Someone whispers scandalous. You swear you hear Mildred crossing herself. In the 1950s, admitting casserole fatigue is basically announcing treason. Your friend laughs. A real, genuine laugh that warms you more than the cup of weak coffee on your counter. For a moment, the line feels lighter, less crowded, almost private until Mrs. Henderson gently clears her throat again. You wrap up the call with your friend, exchanging the usual promises to meet someday soon, a day that will never come because both of you will be trapped under laundry piles forever. You place the receiver back in its cradle, exhale slowly and stare at the wall. You needed support, you got a neighbourhood conference, and yet you'll be back tomorrow. Because in an era without screens, without texting, without escape, this crackling, crowded party line is your only connection to the outside world, your lifeline, your curse, your tiny window of sanity held open by a fraying cord and sheer determination. You head to the store with a paper list, a coin purse, and a toddler who believes knocking over cereal displays is a sport. You push a metal cart that squeaks louder than your internal monologue. The store is only 4 blocks away, but in the 1950s, 4 blocks might as well be the Oregon Trail. You begin the trek with your child in one hand and your sanity in the other, and you're not entirely sure which one will survive. The toddler wiggles like a possessed ferret the entire walk, pointing at every passing car and loudly announcing incorrect facts about them. "That one's a spaceship," they shout. You consider agreeing because frankly you don't have the energy to argue. By the time you reach the entrance, your arms are jelly, your skirt is askew, and your paper grocery list has somehow grown damp from an unknown source. Your child's mouth, probably. You grab a shopping cart, one of those heavy steel-framed monsters designed before the invention of ergonomics. It immediately emits a squeal so sharp you feel it in your molars. Other shoppers turn to look. You smile through your embarrassment as the cart begins veering left of its own free will, dragging you like an excited sled dog. The aisles stretch before you, like a maze designed by someone who hates women. You stop first in produce, where the fruits look suspiciously waxy and the vegetables wilt the moment you approach them. Your toddler grabs an apple, takes one bite, and puts it back with the confidence of a tiny criminal. You pretend not to notice and move on quickly. Next is the canned goods aisle, a metallic canyon of soups, beans, and meats so mysterious the labels won't even commit to identifying them. A can simply titled "Meat Product" stares back at you like it's issuing a challenge. You place it in the cart because it's on sale, and because courage is an important part of the 1950s experience. Other housewives move through the aisles with military precision, selecting items with the efficiency of trained commandos. You envy them. You, meanwhile, are fighting a losing battle with the cart's front wheel, which insists on pointing directly into the shelves. Your child begins touching every item within reach, like some sort of chaotic museum curator. You whisper a firm, desperate, "Please don't," but it has the same effect as whispering into the wind. You stop in the baking aisle to compare prices on flour, a process that takes extra time because your child has now discovered the joy of spinning in circles until they fall over. You pick them up, brush flour dust off their clothes and yours, and try to remember why you ever thought leaving the house was a good idea. A fellow shopper leans over and informs you, very helpfully, that margarine is better for baking. You thank her politely even though her tone suggests she would gladly fight you in the parking lot if you chose butter instead. You head toward the checkout feeling triumphant, until, of course, your toddler decides to sprint, not walk, sprint, toward the candy display with the speed of a caffeinated squirrel. You catch them just before they plunge headfirst into a pyramid of lollipops. Your cart, offended by being abandoned for 2 seconds, slowly rolls backward into a display of potatoes. You retrieve it, your dignity hanging on by a thread. At the register, you unload your items while your toddler asks loud existential questions like, "Why do people have noses? And is the cashier alive?" You hand over your coin purse, calculating exact change because in the 1950s, paying with too large a bill might trigger a lecture on fiscal responsibility. Finally, groceries bagged and child secured, you begin the journey home. The bags dig into your palms. Your toddler insists on carrying the lightest one, immediately drops it and proudly announces, "I helped." You smile, exhausted but somehow victorious. Grocery shopping has been conquered. Barely. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because in the 1950s, the pantry empties faster than your energy reserves. It's time to craft a 7-day meal plan based entirely on gelatin, mayonnaise, and whatever canned mystery meats are on sale. Failure is not an option. Disappointment is. You sit at the kitchen table armed with a pencil, a stack of recipe cards, and a deep sense of dread. The magazines spread before you depict smiling women holding shimmering towers of Jell-O surprise, but none of them mention the emotional toll of feeding a family 3 meals a day using ingredients that jiggle, congeal, or squeak when poked. The expectation is clear. Every evening, your husband must walk through the door, smell dinner, and say, "My, that smells wonderful," instead of the more honest, "Is that fish trapped inside lime gelatin?" You start with Monday. Mondays are safe, predictable, spaghetti night, except the sauce must come from a can and the noodles must be overcooked to the point of collapse, because al dente wasn't invented yet. You write it down, feeling the small comfort of one meal complete. Then you turn to Tuesday, the day when meal plans begin to unravel. The coupons in the newspaper advertise discounted canned ham, and you know what that means. A ham loaf, a loaf made of ham, a shape food only takes when God has left the building. The pencil hesitates. You write it down anyway. Wednesday brings the pressure of variety. The children will revolt if served leftovers again. You consider tuna surprise, which is not so much a recipe as it is a cry for help. Tuna, celery, egg noodles, mayo, and the mystery spice every 1950s cookbook calls seasoning. You imagine stirring the mixture, watching it blur into a single beige entity, and feel your spirit leave your body just briefly. You jot it down. The toddler wanders in, chewing on something that is both unidentified and sticky. You ask where they got it. They shrug. You sigh. This is the exact energy of your meal planning experience: unanswered questions, unidentified textures, and a constant sense that things are both out of control and wildly expected. Thursday is where things grow ambitious. The ladies' magazine suggests a gelatin ring salad, a dish that defies logic and biology. You read the ingredients: lemon gelatin, shredded carrots, canned pineapple, cottage cheese. This is a dish that feels like it was invented during a dare. Still, you need something vaguely fresh, so you scribble it onto Thursday's slot with the reluctant acceptance of someone signing a legally binding contract. Friday calls for something festive, something fun, something that tells your husband, "See? I'm keeping things spontaneous." You choose meatloaf, but not just any meatloaf. The fancy meatloaf with ketchup swirls, the one that requires shaping ground meat with your bare hands until your soul leaves your body for a second time in 1 week. Saturday is a wild card. You glance over at your pantry, at the row of canned ingredients staring back at you like they're plotting something. You choose chicken a la king, which, despite its regal name, is really just chicken suspended in a cream sauce, whose consistency ranges somewhere between stew and regret. It'll do. And Sunday, Sunday, the day of the roast, the meal that proves your worth as a homemaker, the meal your mother-in-law will ask about in excruciating detail. It must be flawless, potatoes crisped, meat tender, gravy thick enough to cling but thin enough to pour, peas unburnt. You write it in the Sunday slot with the solemnity of someone carving commandments into stone. When the plan is finally finished, you sit back and stare at the paper. 7 days, 7 meals, 7 tiny opportunities for someone to frown at you from across the table. You gently fold the meal plan and place it on the counter, exhausted but triumphant. You have done what countless women before you have done, crafted a week of sustenance from sheer willpower, discount coupons, and mayonnaise-based courage, and by next Sunday night, you'll be right back here, pencil in hand, staring into the abyss of another gelatin-filled week. You step into your daily outfit, a cinched waist, a starched collar, and an apron so stiff it could be used as riot gear. Comfort. Never heard of her. The dress alone could qualify as a structural engineering project. It has darts, pleats, hidden seams, and a zipper positioned in a place you physically cannot reach. Getting dressed requires flexibility you do not possess, at least not before your first cup of coffee. You wriggle, you twist, you contort like a circus performer trying to earn her keep. Eventually the dress gives in and settles around you, shaping your body into the silhouette every 1950s magazine insisted was effortless. There's nothing effortless about it. Breathing becomes a luxury. Then comes the petticoat, a fluffy, scratchy underlayer designed to make your skirt poof out like a festive lampshade. The petticoat rustles every time you move, announcing your presence like a disapproving ghost. Your own children can identify you by sound alone. You could be creeping through the house in the dead of night and still give yourself away with a single shh. Next is the bra, a masterpiece of mid-century engineering. The bullet bra, with its aggressively pointed cups, looks more like a weapon than a garment. Wearing it gives you the posture of someone perpetually bracing for impact, and in fairness, you usually are. The thing lifts, separates, and reminds you every hour that gravity is not to be trusted. You tie the apron around your waist, trying not to think about the sheer number of expectations it symbolizes. The fabric is thick enough to deflect meteorites, and the pockets are deep enough to hold snacks, clothespins, broken crayons, 5 tissues, and the crumbling remains of your last moment of peace. The apron's pattern, cheerful cherries, pastel checks, or perhaps a floral explosion, is meant to convey cheerfulness. You put it on and instantly feel 10% more exhausted. Your shoes, sensible flats with arch support designed by someone who hates joy, complete the uniform. They are sturdy, practical, and fully capable of carrying you through a 12-hour day of cooking, cleaning, and chasing small humans who believe gravity is optional. You slip them on with the solemnity of a soldier lacing combat boots. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. The woman staring back looks composed, orderly, put together, not a hair out of place, which is ironic because it took roughly 14 bobby pins, half a can of hairspray, and a whispered prayer to achieve this deceptively simple hairstyle. Every curl is shellacked into immobility. Your hair is now both a fashion statement and a defensive weapon. The magazines tell you this outfit is empowering, that wearing it transforms the boring routine of housework into a glamorous domestic performance. But as you bend over to pick up a sock your child dropped, the waistband digs into your ribs, the skirt balloons upward, and the collar pokes you under the chin. A glamorous performance indeed. You look like a malfunctioning wind-up doll. Still, you soldier on. Because in the 1950s, the housewife uniform isn't just clothing. It's armor, a costume, a silent contract with society that says, yes, I will keep everything perfect even when everything is decidedly not perfect. You glide around the house like a pastel-coloured tornado, fabric swishing, collar scratching, apron pockets filling with evidence of a day spent keeping chaos at bay. By mid-afternoon, the outfit feels less like armour and more like a sauna. The synthetic fibers trap heat with impressive dedication. You begin to understand how turkeys feel in roasting bags. You fan yourself with a recipe card, willing the sweat to evaporate through fabrics that refuse to breathe. Yet despite all of this, the discomfort, the stiffness, the absurdity, you still put it on every morning. Not because it's truly practical, and certainly not because it's comfortable, but because it's expected. And because somewhere deep down, beneath the layers of starch and societal pressure, a small part of you enjoys the ritual, the transformation, the feeling of stepping into a role that women before you performed with grit, humour, and an unspoken understanding that this uniform, ridiculous as it is, represents a part of history too complex to laugh only at. By evening, as you untie the apron and slip out the dress, you inhale fully for the first time all day. Your skin sighs, your ribs expand, your shoulders drop. Freedom. Until 6 a.m. tomorrow, when the uniform calls you back into battle, you take your first sip of burnt percolator coffee while staring blankly into the void. For a brief moment, you ascend spiritually. The kitchen is finally mostly still. The breakfast plates are stacked, the counters wiped, and the children temporarily distracted by something loud and vaguely educational in the next room. You cradle your mug like it contains the secrets of the universe, which in a way it does. Because in the 1950s, this cup of coffee isn't just a beverage, it's your life raft, your anchor, your emotional support liquid. The percolator sputters on the stovetop, sounding like it's trying to clear its throat after smoking a pack of unfiltered cigarettes. The coffee it produces is somehow both weak and bitter at the same time, a magic trick you've never understood. You didn't choose this flavor profile. The flavor profile chose you. Yet you drink it willingly, even gratefully, because caffeine is the closest thing this decade has to therapy. Another sip, it hits your system like a gentle slap. Your eyelids regain some lift. Your brain, fogged from insufficient sleep and an early morning chore marathon, begins to reboot. You stare at the wall, not seeing it so much as communing with it. Time slows down. For these precious 30 seconds, there are no casseroles to plan, no socks to match, no tiny humans shouting your name with the intensity of medieval peasants summoning a village healer. It is peace, fragile, fleeting peace. Then, of course, the world intrudes. A crash in the living room, a shriek, a thud that sounds suspiciously like someone attempting indoor gymnastics. You ignore it, not out of negligence, out of experience. You know the difference between I dropped my toy and we need medical attention, and this falls solidly into the former category. You sip again, the warm ceramic grounding you like a hug from the universe. This pause, this tiny coffee ritual, is the closest thing you have to meditation. No one in the 1950s has heard of mindfulness yet, but you're practicing it accidentally. You inhale the scorched aroma, exhale slowly, and attempt to remember what it feels like to have a single uninterrupted thought. Your mind wanders. You think about your to-do list, long enough to qualify as an ancient scroll. You think about the laundry still hanging on the line, about the roast that needs defrosting, about the neighbour who will inevitably drop by for a friendly inspection of your living room. But the coffee softens everything, turning the mental chaos into background noise. For a moment, you aren't a 1950s housewife with 20 responsibilities and 0 free time. You're simply a woman holding a mug, reclaiming a sliver of her identity sip by caffeinated sip. The kitchen clock ticks, your coffee cools, the faint sounds of your children arguing over a single crayon drift through the doorway. You consider intervening, but the mug is still half full and therefore you are still, temporarily off duty. Coffee time is sacred. Nothing interrupts it unless there is smoke, blood, or the arrival of your mother-in-law. You glance at your reflection in the toaster, dishevelled hair, a faint smear of flour on your cheek, eyes with just enough wild energy to keep going. You lift the mug again. The coffee is now lukewarm, drifting toward cold, but your soul still welcomes it. Eventually, inevitably, the moment ends. You hear the familiar whine of "Mum," drawn out like a siren song. You place the mug down gently, as if setting aside your dreams. The transformation begins, from peaceful coffee spirit back into the domestic warrior your household depends on. You take one last long sip, letting the caffeinated determination settle into your bones. And then, apron straightened, shoulders squared, caffeine coursing through your veins, you re-enter the fray. Because mid-morning coffee might not solve your problems, but it makes you just caffeinated enough to pretend you can. You attend an afternoon Tupperware party where women smile too big, gossip too hard, and pretend plastic containers are the pinnacle of human achievement. The moment you step through the hostess's doorway, you can feel the energy shift, a strange mix of forced enthusiasm, competitive homemaking, and lemon-scented floor polish. The living room has been rearranged into a domestic battlefield. Folding chairs form an eager semicircle around a coffee table, covered in pastel-coloured plastic bowls that look like props from a low-budget sci-fi film. An army of Tupperware containers stands at attention, lids stacked neatly beside them like tiny helmets preparing for combat. Your hostess, dressed in a floral apron you secretly recognise as last year's Christmas gift from her mother-in-law, greets you with a smile that could power the national grid. She ushers you inside with the urgency of someone determined to earn her commission. "Welcome! Can I interest you in a deviled egg?" she asks, offering a tray of snacks that have definitely been sitting out too long. You accept one anyway, because that is the cost of social survival. The other ladies are already seated, chatting in tones equal parts sweet and vaguely threatening. The conversation flows like a river of judgment. One woman compliments another's dress while subtly implying it fits much better than the last one. Someone mentions their husband received a raise. Another casually reveals she alphabetized her spice rack, which earns gasps of admiration and one barely concealed look of jealousy. The 1950s social hierarchy is alive and well, and today it is built on snap-on lids. The Tupperware demonstrator, a woman with a voice so cheerful it borders on alarming, begins the show. She lifts a medium-sized bowl with reverence, as if unveiling a religious relic. "Ladies," she announces, "this container will change your life." She demonstrates the patented burping seal by pressing the lid and producing a soft pop. The crowd reacts as though witnessing a miracle. Someone claps, someone else whispers, "Incredible." You sip your lukewarm punch and nod, pretending you too feel spiritually moved by airtight plastic. The demonstrator moves on to the next trick, stacking. She builds a wobbly tower of bowls, narrating the experience with the gusto of a circus ringmaster. The tower leans. The audience leans with it. For a moment you fear the laws of physics will intervene, but no, the demonstration continues uninterrupted, leaving everyone slightly breathless. Then comes the sales pitch. Order forms are passed around like confidential government documents. You hold the form in your lap while calculating how many containers you can buy without jeopardizing the grocery budget. The demonstrator stands behind you, her hand resting lightly on your shoulder, radiating the energy of someone who will not take no for an answer. You check the box for the starter set because it's the cheapest option, even though you know you'll probably never use half of it. As the order sheets are collected, the gossip shifts into high gear. This is the true purpose of the Tupperware party. Not the products, not the demonstration, not even the sales numbers, but the chance to exchange information at a speed and accuracy that would put military intelligence to shame. You learn who's expecting, who's fighting, who's repainting their kitchen, and who allegedly overcooked their Thanksgiving turkey 3 years ago and still hasn't lived it down. By the time the hostess raffles off a free keychain, which is somehow also Tupperware, everyone is emotionally exhausted. The demonstrator closes the event with the ceremonial stacking of the containers and a curtsy so earnest it nearly brings tears to your eyes. As you gather your coat and half-eaten deviled egg, you realise something important. No one leaves a Tupperware party unchanged. You entered as a woman with a quiet hope for a peaceful afternoon. You exit as a woman who now owns 5 pieces of plastic she didn't plan for and knows far too much about the marital tensions of everyone on the block. You step back into the fresh air feeling oddly victorious. You have survived. Your wallet is lighter, your gossip inventory heavier, and somewhere in your bag a pastel bowl rattles with your dignity. You drag a vacuum heavier than your emotional load, praying it doesn't rip up the carpet or detonate spontaneously, like it did last Wednesday. The machine looms at the edge of the living room like a disgruntled rhinoceros. It is made entirely of metal, no plastic, no ergonomic handle, no apology for its behaviour. Just dense, unyielding steel and a cord long enough to lasso a cow. You grab the handle, immediately questioning every life decision that brought you to this moment, and begin the slow heave necessary to tilt the thing upright. Your spine makes a noise you hope is not permanent. Once standing, the vacuum hums with a low, ominous growl, not running, merely thinking. You plug it in, and for a brief moment the lights dim across the entire house, as though offering a moment of silence for what's about to happen. The vacuum roars to life, a sound so thunderous it could drown out a marching band. You flinch. Your children flinch. The dog flees to the next county. You begin pushing the machine forward, though pushing is generous. It is more like negotiating. Every inch of carpet is a battle, every turn a debate between you and the vacuum about who is really in charge. Spoiler, it's not you. The front nozzle snarls greedily at the rug, chewing at it the way toddlers chew on crayons. You yank back firmly, praying the vacuum will not eat the fringe again. Last time it did, it left behind a bald patch that still whispers of trauma. As you maneuver around furniture, the vacuum seems almost insulted by the effort. It jerks suddenly, the kind of movement that forces you to plant your feet like a professional wrestler. The suction is so strong you worry it might lift the entire carpet off the floor and expose the secrets beneath. Crumbs, resentment, and possibly that missing puzzle piece from last year. You try to maintain a steady rhythm. Push forward, yank back, push forward, yank back. Your arms burn, your shoulders tremble. Your hair, perfectly curled an hour ago, begins to wilt under the strain. If fitness gurus existed in the 1950s, they would simply hand out vacuums and say, "Good luck." And just when you think you've found your groove, the cord betrays you. It wraps around your ankles with the precision of a snake that's been studying your habits. You stumble. The vacuum lunges forward unsupervised, bumping aggressively into the coffee table as if trying to escape domestic servitude. You scramble after it, catching the handle just before it reaches the good lamp, the one you pretend is an heirloom even though it came from the Sears catalogue. You pause, panting, sweat gathering politely at your temples. The vacuum growls impatiently, urging you to continue this gladiatorial contest. So you do. Because the carpet is covered in crumbs from breakfast, scraps of paper from the toddler's artistic endeavours, and at least 7 grains of rice that have fused with the fibre somehow. You keep going even though this feels less like cleaning and more like taming a supernatural beast. Finally, miraculously, the vacuum quiets. You flip the switch, and the sudden silence is so profound it feels like stepping into a cathedral. The machine winds down with a sigh, like a dragon settling onto its hoard. You unplug it, coil the cord with the weary expertise of someone who has fought this battle too many times, and roll the vacuum back into its usual resting place. It sits there, heavy and silent, pretending to be harmless. You know better. Because in the 1950s, the vacuum cleaner isn't just a household appliance, it is a daily test of strength, courage, and your willingness to survive another morning in domestic combat. And tomorrow, it will challenge you again. Shirts, skirts, napkins, pillowcases, everything must be ironed. Even the things no one sees. You begin questioning whether flatness is truly a virtue. The ironing board stands before you like an altar to domestic suffering. Its wobbly legs rattle when you touch it, sending a small shiver through the thin, scorched fabric cover that has seen more battles than most military veterans. You place your stack of freshly washed clothes beside it, a tower of cotton and obligation. Each item whispers, "Fix me," in a tone that is both needy and accusatory. The iron itself is a heavy metal relic whose sole purpose is to turn water and electricity into steam-powered despair. You plug it in, and it emits a low hiss, the sound of something awakening reluctantly from its slumber. The heat builds slowly, ominously. You can feel it radiating from across the room like a miniature sun preparing to collapse in on itself. You start with a shirt. You always start with a shirt. Shirts are the gateway chore, deceptively simple, undeniably cruel. You lay it flat, smoothing each panel like a surgeon preparing for an operation. But the fabric refuses to cooperate. It wrinkles in new places just as you iron out the old ones, mocking your efforts. You glide the iron over the cotton with the seriousness of a monk raking a Zen garden, hoping for inner peace but receiving sweat and mild shoulder pain instead. When you lift the iron, a crisp line appears. Victory. Small, fleeting victory. You allow yourself one proud inhale, then notice the tiny crease running diagonally across the pocket. A crease that wasn't there before. A crease that formed specifically to remind you that you are not in control. You iron it out, only for another crease to appear on the sleeve. It is a never-ending game of wrinkle whack-a-mole. Next, you tackle the skirts. Long, wide, pleated skirts that should really count as 3 separate garments. You unfold one, and it cascades across the ironing board like a crumpled parachute. You press carefully, inch by inch, until the pleats lie obediently temporarily. A breeze from the open window sends half your progress into chaos. You shut the window with the quiet determination of someone locking out the forces of evil. Then come the napkins, tiny squares of fabric that by all logic should be simple. But no, napkins are personal. Napkins hold grudges. They wrinkle in geometric patterns so elaborate they could be studied by mathematicians. You press one corner and watch the opposite corner curl up like a taunting finger. You flatten it again. It curls. You breathe deeply through your nose, reminding yourself that prison is not an option because you have dinner to cook later. Halfway through the pile, you lose your sense of time. The clock on the wall no longer moves in normal increments. Minutes melt into hours. You're convinced you've stepped into some domestic time warp where the rest of the world continues on, while you remain trapped in an endless cycle of steam and cotton. You swear you ironed this pillowcase already. Maybe twice. Maybe in another lifetime. As the room fills with warm humidity, your hair slowly deflates from its carefully styled curls into something resembling wilted lettuce. A small bead of sweat drips down your temple. You dab it away with the edge of a dish towel you already know you'll have to iron later. Your husband wanders through the room briefly, humming, unaware of the Herculean labour unfolding before him. "Need anything?" he asks casually, as though you haven't been wrestling with fabric for what feels like the entirety of human history. You smile politely, or at least you think you do. You may simply be baring your teeth. Finally, the last item approaches. A fitted sheet. You stare at it. It stares back. Both of you know this is not going to end well. You do your best, smoothing the elastic edges, stretching the corners, but fitted sheets were not designed for human hands. They were designed as a test of faith, the final boss fight of domesticity. You try, you fail, you surrender. When the ironing is finally done, you unplug the iron like a warrior lowering her sword. The board sighs as you fold it away. Your shoulders ache, your hands smell faintly of steam and fabric softener, and your soul feels flatter than it did before. But the house is quieter. The clothes are crisp. Order, temporary, fragile order, is restored, at least until tomorrow. Wrinkles always return, and so, inevitably will you. You push a baby carriage that could double as a lunar rover. The wheels wobble, the handle groans, and somehow the baby is fine. Probably. The stroller, or pram, as the glossy magazines insist on calling it, weighs approximately the same as a mid-sized sedan. Its metal frame gleams in the sun, a polished and intimidating relic of post-war engineering. You grip the handle, which emits a small, tragic squeak every time you move, as though protesting its own existence. The wheels spin inconsistently, wobbling wildly like they were installed by a toddler with a wrench. But this is your daily routine. This is your fresh air. This is your attempt at peace. You begin your walk with optimism, stepping onto the sidewalk with a deep breath and a forced smile. The pram, however, has other ideas. It jerks forward unexpectedly, tugging you along like a dog that has spotted a squirrel. You regain control, sort of, and settle into a slow, deliberate pace, the only speed at which the stroller doesn't actively attempt to tip over. Your baby peers up at you from inside the carriage, swaddled in layers of blankets so thick they resemble a politely blinking loaf of bread. They seem content, or at least unaware, which is a relief because you're fairly certain the suspension system on this thing was designed by someone who had never met a baby or a sidewalk. You pass by the neighbours' houses where every curtain rustles with curiosity. Afternoon walks are a public performance. Mrs. Patterson waves from her porch, her smile bright but her eyes scanning the stroller with an expression that silently evaluates its cleanliness, your outfit, and the baby's general glow. You wave back and try to look like someone who absolutely knows what she's doing. The street is mostly quiet. A distant lawnmower drones. Birds chirp with suspicious cheerfulness. A light breeze brushes your face, reminding you that for a brief moment you're not inside cleaning, ironing, cooking, or negotiating with a toddler over the ethical use of crayons. This walk, chaotic as it is, counts as restorative. You push forward, literally and figuratively. The pram's front left wheel hits a pebble and reacts as though it has struck Mount Everest. The entire stroller tilts dramatically and you lunge. To steady it, your heart leaps. Your baby blinks. A man walking his dog watches your struggle with a level of fascination usually reserved for nature documentaries. You straighten the stroller, breathe deeply, and continue. About 5 blocks in, the real danger appears, a slight incline. A hill so gentle modern strollers would laugh at it. Not yours. No, your pram interprets this incline as a personal challenge. Gravity tugs, the wheels rattle with unholy enthusiasm, and you must now engage your entire upper body strength to keep the carriage from rolling downhill like a runaway stagecoach. You lean back, gripping the handle until your knuckles blanch. The stroller rattles intensely, and for a terrifying moment, you're unsure who is walking whom. You reach the top, breathless, triumphant, and profoundly aware that you have done something heroic. At the halfway mark, you pause under a tree. Not because the baby needs anything. The baby is blissfully asleep despite your near-death experience, but because you need a moment. You rest your hands on the handle, letting the sun warm your face. There's a strange comfort in the quiet repetition of these walks. They remind you that even in the monotony, there are small, sacred stretches of stillness, even if they last only 90 seconds. On the return trip, the stroller behaves marginally better, which you suspect is less about engineering and more about divine intervention. You avoid potholes. You navigate around a group of children drawing chalk flowers in the street. You hum softly, feeling something close to calm. Back home, you lift the baby from the carriage, marvelling at how peacefully they've slept through the mechanical chaos. You park the pram in the corner, where it sits like a dormant creature saving its strength for tomorrow's battle. Because every afternoon, without fail, you will walk this route again, and the stroller, unpredictable, demanding, indestructible, will come with you. A strange partnership, maybe. But in its own absurd way it works. Your children invent new kinds of indoor chaos hourly. Crayons on walls, marbles in noses, tantrums that last longer than some wars. You smile through it. Managing children in the 1950s is a test of endurance so intense it should qualify you for a government pension. There are no tablets, no cartoons on demand, no cheerful animated characters teaching them to count. Entertainment is limited to whatever objects they find on the floor and whatever trouble their imaginations can conjure. Naturally, this means your home is an active disaster zone at all times. Every corner holds a potential hazard, not for the children, but for you. Your toddler's favourite pastime is scribbling on walls with crayons. They do it with such dedication it feels like you're living inside a prehistoric cave painting. You've tried hiding the crayons, but they materialise anyway, as though summoned by dark artistic forces. One day it's rainbows on the hallway door, the next it's an abstract portrait of the family dog rendered entirely in burnt sienna. Meanwhile, your older child has developed an alarming curiosity about their own bodily openings. You turn your back for 1 minute, one single minute, and suddenly they're informing you that a marble went in but won't come out. You calmly assess the situation with the practiced grace of someone who has seen things. You tip their head, shine a flashlight, whisper a quiet plea to the universe, and retrieve the marble with tweezer-like precision. Then you take a deep breath and pretend this is a normal Tuesday. The tantrums are the true test, however. They arrive with the subtlety of an earthquake. 1 minute your child is sitting peacefully, stacking wooden blocks, humming tunelessly. The next minute they're horizontal on the floor, kicking the air like a disgruntled octopus, wailing because you cut their sandwich into triangles instead of squares. The crying reaches a pitch that could alert bats in the next county. You kneel beside them with the patience of a saint and the emotional stability of a person dangling from a fraying rope. Use your words, you say, gently. They respond by shrieking louder. You consider joining them, just for the catharsis, but decide against it because someone needs to remain conscious. You then pivot to distraction, the bedrock of 1950s parenting. You hand them a wooden toy, a picture book, a pot and spoon, anything. They accept it enthusiastically for approximately 6 seconds before launching it across the room with the strength of a competitive shot put athlete. The pot clatters on the floor, the baby startles, and now both children are crying. You inhale slowly, exhale slowly, and wonder what it must feel like to sit for 5 consecutive minutes without someone yelling your name. Snacks, the modern parent's greatest weapon, barely exist. There are no pouches, no granola bars, no little bags of organic something or other shaped like farm animals. Snacks in the 1950s are apple slices or saltines. That's it. Your children reject both with the confidence of tiny food critics who deserve better. So you usher them outside, hoping fresh air will tame whatever primal energy possesses them today. But outside brings its own challenges. Dirt becomes a toy. Sticks become swords. A harmless bug becomes a dramatic crisis when someone steps on it by accident on purpose. The toddler eats grass. The older child attempts to climb a tree with the strategy of someone who has never climbed anything before. You hover protectively, hands outstretched, ready to catch a falling limb or a falling child, whichever comes first. Eventually, miraculously, the chaos slows. A quiet moment emerges as if granted by divine mercy. The children sit together, drawing shapes in the dirt with their fingers, humming softly. You watch them, exhausted but oddly touched. Because beneath the mayhem, beneath the noise and the mess and the countless tiny disasters, there is something raw and beautiful. Kids simply being kids. And you, weary, patient, half-aerial from sleep deprivation, are the lighthouse keeping them afloat. It's not perfect. It's not peaceful. But somehow, unbelievably, you're doing it. One tantrum, one crayon mural, one marble extraction at a time. You check the mailbox hoping for excitement. Instead, you get bills, catalogues, and a stern letter from your mother-in-law. Every day around noon, you begin listening for it. The rhythmic clatter of the mail truck as it rolls down your street, coughing exhaust like an asthmatic dragon. It is the sound of possibility. The only moment in your daily routine where something, anything, could happen that you didn't orchestrate yourself. You stand by the window, casually pretending to dust the sill, while actually monitoring the mailbox as though it's about to hatch. Then it arrives. The mailman, wearing a uniform, somehow both crisp and exhausted, trudges up your walkway. He slips envelopes into your mailbox, gives the lid a firm metallic clack, and disappears to his next stop. Your heart does a tiny, hopeful flutter. Perhaps today there will be a letter from an old friend, a magazine with recipes you'll pretend you might try, a postcard from a distant relative visiting a beach you'll never see but can admire from afar. You step outside and approach the mailbox with a solemn reverence. A breeze rustles the trees, a bird chirps. It feels ceremonial, almost spiritual, like opening a treasure chest in a fantasy story. Unfortunately, instead of gold coins, you find a stack of envelopes that smell faintly of disappointment. Bills, always bills. Electricity, gas, phone, water. Each one a reminder that modern conveniences come with a price tag you must somehow keep up with. Despite earning exactly $0 for running a full household, you flip through them with the resignation of someone who has seen this plot twist too many times. Next comes the catalogues, bright glossy promises of a better life through new curtains or patio sets. You know you shouldn't look. You know these catalogues exist solely to tempt you into coveting things your budget laughs at. And yet you peek anyway. You run your fingers across pictures of patterned wallpapers and dream briefly of transforming your living room into a magazine-worthy oasis. Then you remember the last time you attempted wallpapering and how it ended in tears, bubbles, and a strip of paper permanently glued to your elbow. And then the letter, the one from her. Your mother-in-law's handwriting is unmistakable. Tight, elegant, and slightly ominous. Even the envelope feels judgmental. You open it slowly, bracing yourself. The contents rarely involve compliments. Instead, they usually contain gentle suggestions about your housekeeping, parenting, cooking, or posture. Sometimes all four. You unfold the letter. It begins, as always, with Dear Margaret, despite your repeated reminders that your name is not Margaret. She asks how the children are doing, then immediately implies you're not feeding them enough vegetables. She inquires about your husband, then subtly references that his shirts looked a bit dull last time she visited. She recommends a new casserole recipe because your last one seemed rushed. You close your eyes and inhale. You imagine a world where envelopes burst into confetti instead of criticism. You tuck the letter into a drawer you refer to privately as the inbox of emotional fortitude, a collection of correspondence you plan to deal with someday, maybe in another lifetime. Just as you're about to head back inside, something catches your eye. A small card tucked behind the electric bill. Your pulse quickens. Could it be a note from a friend? A cheerful greeting? A surprise invitation? You pull it out dramatically and discover it's a coupon for 10 cents off powdered milk. You stare at it for a moment, suspended between laughter and despair. Then, because hope springs eternal, you slip it into your apron pocket. You never know when powdered milk might become the highlight of your week. As you walk back to the house, you feel the tiniest lift in your spirit. Because even though today's mail brought nothing thrilling, no surprises, no secrets, no declarations of admiration from afar, it still offered a moment of anticipation. A brief sparkle in the routine, a tiny reminder that something new could happen, even if it usually doesn't. And tomorrow, when the mail truck groans down the street again, you'll listen. You'll look out the window. You'll hope. Because in the 1950s, the mail is more than envelopes. It's the daily promise of possibility, however slim, wrapped in paper and ink. You open the fridge and contemplate the eternal question. How many meals can one create using only cream of mushroom? Soup? The answer, according to every 1950s cookbook and your mother-in-law, is all of them. Cream of mushroom soup is less a food and more a foundational principle of mid-century cuisine. It's the culinary glue that holds your sanity and several structurally questionable casseroles turned together. You stare at the pale beige can, feeling it stare right back, daring you to get creative. The fridge itself is a barren landscape. A half stick of butter, a wilting head of lettuce, 3 pickles floating in their jar like pale green ghosts, and of course, the soup. A modern chef would panic. You, however, are a seasoned soldier of the casserole front lines. You roll up your sleeves and begin assembling ingredients like a chemist performing delicate and slightly dangerous experiments. You start by opening the soup can, a task that requires your hand crank opener, which is older than your marriage and twice as stubborn. It groans theatrically as you twist, as if insulted by being forced to work again. Finally, with a soft metallic sigh, the lid releases, revealing the familiar gelatinous blob. It plops into the mixing bowl with a sound that is not encouraging. From there, dinner becomes a symphony of substitutions. No chicken. Spam will do. No noodles. Rice might work, provided you ignore the fact that you burned it last week and are still emotionally recovering. No fresh vegetables. Canned peas, with their vaguely haunted expressions, will step in as your green component. You season everything with a sprinkle of salt, a hopeful dash of pepper, and the silent prayer that no one asks what's actually in this. Your kitchen heats up as the oven preheats to approximately the temperature of a small sun. The casserole dish, chipped along the rim but still valiantly hanging on, gets a generous layer of butter. Not because the recipe calls for it, but because everything in this decade requires butter. It's the 1950s version of holy water. As you mix, stir and fold ingredients into a unified mass, you begin questioning the entire concept of casseroles. Who invented them? Why did they gain so much power? And why, despite everything, do they still sort of work? Even the kids will eat them, provided they're hungry enough, and the top layer contains an acceptable amount of melted cheese. You pour the mixture into the dish, smoothing the surface like a potter finishing a fragile piece of art. You sprinkle breadcrumbs on top, not for flavour, really, but for the illusion of texture. Into the oven it goes, and you set the timer with the knowledge that the next 45 minutes will be spent cleaning, organising, and quietly judging your own decisions. While the casserole bakes, the house fills with a smell that is comforting, concerning, a bit of both. Creamy, savoury, distinctly beige. Your husband wanders through the kitchen, sniffs the air and asks, "Is that dinner, or is something burning?" You give him a look that silently communicates how close you are to emotional collapse. He retreats immediately. Your children appear next, circling like impatient little satellites. "What's for dinner?" they ask, peering into the oven as though expecting fireworks. You tell them it's a surprise, which is code for "I don't know what this is either, but we're all too far in to turn back now." Finally the timer dings. You open the oven and pull out a bubbling, golden-topped creation that looks like every casserole ever made. It sputters, it sizzles, it jiggles. It is both familiar and unidentifiable. It is dinner. You set it on the table, proud in the way only someone who has battled both time and ingredients can be proud. Your family sits. They scoop. They chew. They nod approvingly. Victory. You've done it again. Transformed a can of condensed soup and a prayer into a meal that feeds everyone, even if no one can quite describe the flavour. Because in the 1950s, dinner isn't just nourishment. It's survival. Layered. Baked. And served in a casserole dish that refuses to die. Your husband casually announces he's invited co-workers over for dinner. Tonight. At 7. You have 2 hours to become Martha Stewart with none of the resources. You stand there blinking at him, spatula in hand, trying to process the information. 2 hours. 2 hours. In 1950s housewife time, that's barely enough to locate the good tablecloth, let alone produce a full, respectable meal that won't tarnish your family name for 3 generations. Your husband smiles, blissfully unaware of the magnitude of the chaos he has unleashed. Then he adds, "Oh, and one of them's bringing his wife. Wonderful. An audience." You immediately enter crisis mode. The kitchen suddenly looks like a crime scene. Every pot is dirty, every surface is sticky. The casserole dish from last night is still soaking in the sink, except it isn't soaking. It's just sitting there, judging you. You begin, moving with the frantic energy of someone who has listened to too many motivational speeches. Step 1. Clean everything. Absolutely everything. Even things no human eye will see, such as the inside of your cabinets and the top of the fridge where dust goes to retire. You sprint through the living room, plumping pillows with a level of aggression that surprises even you. You hide children's toys under the sofa, fully aware they will not be found until the next decade. You fold throws, straighten magazines, and shift furniture back into positions you're convinced look intentional. Your hair, which you styled carefully this morning, frizzes with stress. Your apron clings to your torso. You do not have time to breathe. Then comes the menu. What do you serve? What can you serve in under 2 hours? Your eyes land on the pantry shelves lined with canned goods like a metallic army waiting for orders. You grab the cream of mushroom soup. Of course, you grab 2 cans. It's going to be one of those nights. You throw together a casserole with the desperation of a contestant on a cooking show where the stakes are eternal shame. It goes into the oven. You pray. Next, dessert. Something elegant, something impressive, something fast. You reach for gelatin. The 1950s answer to everything. You whip up a jello mold with fruit suspended in it like artifacts discovered from an alien excavation. It wobbles ominously as you place it in the fridge, hoping it solidifies before the guests arrive. If not, dessert will be fruit soup. Again. You whirl around the kitchen in a cloud of flour and fury. Pots rattle, floors squeak. The children sense danger and cling to your legs, asking deep philosophical questions like, why is Daddy allowed to invite strangers? And can we eat the jello now? You redirect them with the skill of a seasoned diplomat. The clock ticks. It is now 6:30. You look like someone who has run through a wind tunnel. You dab powder on your flushed face, reapply lipstick with trembling hands, and attempt to smooth your apron. Your reflection in the hallway mirror stares back at you, a woman on the brink but holding the line. At 6:55, the doorbell rings. You freeze. Time slows. You open the door to find your husband's co-workers standing there, smiling politely, unaware that you have aged emotionally by roughly 12 years in the last 120 minutes. They hand you a store-bought pie, the universal sign that they too do not fully trust what's about to happen. You usher them inside with your warmest hostess voice, the one you reserve for moments when the house is on fire, but you want guests to feel comfortable. They compliment the smell coming from the kitchen. You nod graciously, pretending the casserole did not almost erupt in the oven like a dairy-based volcano. Throughout dinner, you pour drinks, serve food, laugh at jokes, and maintain an expression of serene competence. Inside, however, you are approximately 3 seconds from collapsing into a decorative heap on the linoleum. But the guests smile, the conversation flows, and no one sends their meal back to the kitchen with a doctor's note. This counts as triumph. When they finally leave and the door clicks shut, you sag against the wall in exhausted victory. You have done it. You have achieved the impossible. You have hosted unexpected guests and survived. Tomorrow, though, you're hiding the doorbell. You reapply lipstick, hairspray, and a smile that hides the exhaustion of 1,000 lifetimes. In the 1950s, looking presentable is not just an aspiration, it is a full-time job layered on top of your other full-time job. You stand in front of the bathroom mirror, examining the face staring back at you. The lipstick from this morning has faded into a ghostly outline. Your hair, once obedient, is now listing slightly to starboard. Your eyes have that glazed expression usually reserved for characters in survival documentaries. But do you get to look tired? Absolutely not. Fatigue is a private hobby, hidden away like your emergency chocolate stash. You start with the lipstick, true red, because the magazines claim it projects confidence and keeps your husband interested, as though marital harmony rests entirely on the brightness of your mouth. You swipe the tube across your lips, attempting symmetry while a child pounds on the bathroom door demanding attention. You ignore them. Beauty requires sacrifice, usually theirs. Next comes the powder. You dab it lightly onto your face, pretending it will erase the evidence of your day. The flour that puffed at you during breakfast, the sweat from your vacuum battle, the silent tears shed during laundry. The powder settles into place, creating the illusion of smooth, serene composure. A lie, but a beautiful one. Then there's your hair. Oh, your hair. Once a sculpted masterpiece anchored with pins and chemical fortitude, it has now begun to fray. You grab the hairspray, a bottle so strong it could double as industrial adhesive, and unleash a mist cloud that instantly reduces the oxygen in the room. You smooth your curls, patting them into shape with the gentle desperation of someone trying to calm an angry cat. The hair complies, but only because it fears the hairspray. Your outfit gets a quick inspection next. The dress is technically clean, if you ignore the faint smear of casserole near the hem and the child-sized handprints on the hip. You brush the fabric briskly, hoping friction will somehow restore respectability. Your apron, stiff and floral, is retied into a neat bow. You practice your posture, shoulders back, chin lifted, stomach held in through sheer willpower. You resemble a woman who has everything under control, even if your internal monologue is begging for a nap. You finish off with your smile, the pièce de résistance. A delicate upturn of the lips, carefully calibrated, too small, and people will ask if something is wrong. Too large, and they'll think you've joined a cult. You study the smile in the mirror, adjusting it like an engineer fine-tuning machinery. Yes, that one. The I'm fine. Thank you smile. The one that hides the emotional miles you've travelled since sunrise. Your husband strolls by, glancing at you with casual admiration. You look nice, he says, unaware that you have just performed a personal resurrection in front of the mirror. You respond sweetly, because explaining the emotional labour of beauty would require more energy than you have left. The children run past next, sticky and chaotic, one dropping crumbs like a trail of destruction. You freeze, assessing the risks. They graze your skirt. A crumb lands on your shoe. Disaster averted. Barely. You wipe it away with a grace earned only through daily crises. You walk into the living room, maintaining elegance despite the fact that every bone in your body wants to collapse onto the couch and dissolve into the upholstery. Your smile stays perfectly in place as you gather scattered toys, straighten pillows, and present yourself as the cheerful heartbeat of the home. Because in the 1950s, beauty is not about self-expression. It's performance art, a delicate balancing act between sincerity and survival. And although you feel like a thirsty houseplant abandoned in full sun, you still bloom, outwardly anyway. Tomorrow you'll do it again. The lipstick will fade. The curls will fall. But the performance never stops. Your well-plated meal arrives at the table like a fragile peace offering. The children immediately revolt, declaring the food suspicious. You force a smile, the kind that twitches at the corners as if reconsidering its life choices, and set the casserole dish gently, very gently, onto the table. You've spent the last hour crafting this meal with the precision of a medieval alchemist mixing volatile potions. Butter was melted, sauces were whisked. At one point you whispered a quiet prayer into the oven. But now that it's on the table, the entire fate of your evening rests in the hands of two small food critics who have never eaten a vegetable without staging a protest. Your husband leans forward, inhaling dramatically. "Smells good," he says, which in husband language translates to, "I recognize effort has occurred and wish not to perish tonight." He scoops a spoonful onto his plate, steam rising in soft spirals. He smiles at you reassuringly, but his eyes betray the same cautious curiosity as a man discovering an unfamiliar animal in the backyard. The children, however, have no such diplomacy. One pokes the casserole with the blunt end of their fork as though checking for signs of life. The younger one leans back in their chair, squints and says, "It looks weird." You resist the urge to point out that they ate a crayon earlier with zero hesitation. You encourage them gently, coaxing like a hostage negotiator. "Just one. Bite," you say. "You might like it." They stare at you with the solemn, betrayed expression of someone being asked to donate a kidney. Meanwhile, the butter, the central hero of most 1950s meals, glistens proudly on the table. You have not merely used butter tonight. You have summoned it. It's in the casserole, on the vegetables, brushed lightly across the dinner rolls, and melting slowly in a small dish near your elbow. If someone sneezed right now, a light mist of butter might emerge. You serve yourself last, carefully arranging your plate with the grace of someone pretending they've eaten more than 2 meals sitting down this week. You take a bite. It's fine, maybe even good. Hard to tell. Your tongue is numb from taste testing earlier, and everything you eat lately contains cream of something soup. The conversation begins. Your husband talks about work. The children interrupt him to share vital information, such as who stole whose toy, who needs more milk, and who definitely did not put peas up their nose. You nod, smile, mediate, redirect, and refill cups. Dinner feels less like a meal and more like managing a small, emotionally fragile parliament. Halfway through, disaster strikes. A fork clatters onto the floor. Milk spills. A roll is launched accidentally on purpose across the table in a moment of dramatic flair. You leap into action with your napkin and your weary, unshakable patience. You mop, wipe and soothe while reminding yourself that somewhere deep inside you once had hobbies. Your husband compliments the casserole again, this time with more confidence. You take that as a victory, a small buttery diamond in the rough. The children, after sustained negotiations, each take 3 reluctant bites. One grimaces like they've been poisoned, while the other chews so slowly you wonder if their jaw has entered a new time zone. But then, just as you begin to lose hope, your oldest child says, "It's not terrible." You nearly faint. That sentence, in the dialect of small children, is a Michelin star. The meal winds down, plates empty. The casserole dish sits scraped but not finished, which places it firmly in the category of moderately successful. You collect the dishes and place them in the sink, adding them to the mountainous to-do list that now spans all horizontal surfaces of your brain. As you wipe the table, you catch yourself smiling. Not because dinner was perfect, far from it, but because it happened. Because despite the battles, the bribery, the spills, the sighs, the questionable flavour combinations, you made something, you fed your family, you held the line. Dinner may have been built on stress and butter, but it also survived contact with your household. And in the world of the 1950s, Housewife, that counts as triumph. After dinner, the real work begins. Scrubbing, rinsing, drying, sweeping, and muttering quiet curses into the sink water. The table still trembles with the aftershocks of dinner chaos. Crumbs scattered like archaeological clues, smeared sauces forming abstract art, and a fork somehow wedged between two chair slats at an angle that defies physics. You stand at the edge of it all, a lone warrior armed with a dish towel and the kind of resolve people write motivational posters about. You begin with the plates, scraping off a combination of half-chewed dinner and emotional residue. The garbage pail accepts your offerings with a hollow thud that echoes your own weary sigh. 1 plate, 2 plates, 8 plates. How did this many people eat here? You don't remember inviting a small army, and yet the dishes multiply like rabbits with strong work ethics. You fill the sink with hot water and dish soap. The surface fizzes, forming a layer of foam that looks deceptively cheerful, as if trying to distract you from the fact that you will be standing here until your fingers prune into raisins. Steam wafts upward, fogging your glasses and making it impossible to tell whether you're tearing up from exhaustion or onion vapour from earlier. Probably both. You dunk the first plate and scrub with the determination of someone cleansing past regrets. The sponge squeaks loudly, announcing your effort to the entire neighbourhood. You mutter something under your breath, nothing obscene, but something with enough edge to politely convey your feelings. Your husband wanders past, placing his empty glass beside you without comment, and retreats quickly. He knows better. When the dishes are finally rinsed and drying in a precarious tower on the rack, you turn your attention to the pans. These pans, forged in the fires of mid-century cookware factories, are indestructible. They weigh as much as small anvils and require the strength of a blacksmith to clean. You scrub. The pan resists. You scrub harder. It resists with more enthusiasm. Eventually, after a battle that leaves your arm trembling, the pan concedes, gleaming triumphantly in the dim kitchen light. Next up, the counters. Each one is a battlefield of sticky fingerprints, grease smudges, and breadcrumbs that have somehow migrated into corners untouched by human hands. You wipe them down repeatedly, watching new smears appear as though conjured by domestic spirits. You sigh. You wipe again. You wonder how many calories this burns. Probably not enough. The broom becomes your next companion. You sweep the floor in long, practiced strokes, gathering crumbs, dust, and a single rogue pea that escaped dinner drama. The broom bristles drag across the linoleum with a soft whispering sound. Soothing, almost hypnotic, until you realise your toddler is following behind you, dropping more crumbs from a cookie they absolutely did not have permission to take. You pause, you stare, they smile, you keep sweeping. Resistance is futile. Finally, you face the stove. The stove is less an appliance and more an abstract representation of entropy. Splatters mark every surface. A sauce, bubble has dried into a geological formation. You spray, scrub, wipe, scrub again. At one point you lean your forehead against the oven door and wonder if the pioneers felt this tired. When the kitchen is finally clean, you stand back and admire your work. It's not perfect, but it's close enough for someone who has done 12 hours of unpaid labour and still needs to coax 2 children into pyjamas. You hang the dish towel over the oven handle. You turn off the light. The quiet is immediate and soothing. And then, of course, you hear it. A small voice from the hallway. "Mum, I'm hungry." You close your eyes. You inhale slowly. You consider moving to Canada, but you turn the light back on anyway. Because in the 1950s, the second shift isn't just a chore. It's a lifestyle, one that no one pays you for, but everyone depends on. Your husband pours himself a whiskey. You pour yourself a seltzer and pretend it's fine. You briefly fantasize about running away to Mexico. The drink clinks gently in your husband's glass, a warm amber glow swirling beneath soft lamplight. He settles into his favourite armchair with the satisfied sigh of a man who has completed all of his responsibilities for the day. You observe this phenomenon from across the room, holding a glass of fizzing seltzer that tastes like disappointment pretending to be refreshing. You raise it to your lips anyway, sipping the bubbles as though they might magically turn into tequila if you wish hard enough. The living room is finally still. Toys have been corralled into baskets. Dinner dishes have been conquered. The floor, despite your best sweeping efforts, contains exactly one crumb you refuse to acknowledge. You ease onto the couch, sinking into a cushion reshaped by years of service, and attempt to adopt an expression of calm relaxation. Inside, however, your mind is sprinting through all the things you still have to do tomorrow. Your husband swirls his whiskey, like a philosopher contemplating great truths. "Long day," he says, unaware that your day was long before his even began. You hum politely in agreement. You don't resent him exactly. He works hard too. But you do marvel at the ease with which he transitions from fully awake to fully off duty. It's like watching someone flip a light switch with the confidence of a man who's never had a child scream at him because peas touched mashed potatoes. You raise your seltzer again, letting the bubbles snap weakly against your tongue. You pretend it's relaxing. You pretend it's enough. Deep down, however, a small mischievous part of you wonders what would happen if you stood up right now, walked out the door and kept going until you reached a warm beach in Mexico with no laundry and no casseroles. The image is soothing. You linger in it for a moment. A woman, sun on her face, hair blowing gently in a breeze that smells like coconut instead of responsibility. Then the toddler drops a stuffed animal onto your lap, jolting you back into reality. Your husband takes another sip of whiskey. He sighs contentedly. "You should relax more," he says, unaware that this sentence is the verbal equivalent of poking a sleeping bear with a toothpick. You smile, a tight, serene smile that contains the force of 1,000 unspoken retorts, and shrug as though relaxation is something you haven't been attempting since the Eisenhower administration. You turn your attention to the radio. A soft melody drifts through the room, crooners pouring velvet vowels into the quiet. You let your shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. The seltzer in your glass hisses like it's whispering encouragement or sympathy. Hard to tell. Your mind wanders again. You think about the laundry you didn't finish, the grocery list you need to update, the school project your child casually mentioned is due tomorrow probably. The mental load is a constant hum, not loud but ever present, like a refrigerator that never stops running. Your husband stands, stretches and tells you he's heading to bed. He kisses your forehead, smelling faintly of whiskey and aftershave, and disappears down the hallway. Just like that, his day ends. Yours not quite. There are still lights to turn off, toys to relocate, and a lingering sticky patch on the dining table you noticed earlier. but ignored for your own emotional safety. You finish your seltzer, the least satisfying treat known to womankind, and set the glass gently in the sink. For a moment you sit in the dimly lit living room, hands folded, eyes softening. You allow yourself to breathe deeply, to acknowledge the strain of the day, and to find a quiet thread of gratitude woven through all of it. Not because the day was easy, but because somehow, impossibly, you carried it. You rise from the couch, stretch your aching back, and glance toward the silent hallway. Mexico will have to wait. For now, peace looks like a dim lamp, a cooling glass, and the knowledge that you made it through another day. You sit with the family, pretending everyone is having fun while silently begging for bedtime to arrive. Family time in the 1950s is not optional. It is a moral obligation, a cultural expectation, and a daily performance of togetherness regardless of anyone's emotional bandwidth. You settle into the living room, smoothing your skirt, arranging your smile, and taking your seat on the couch like an actress stepping into her final role of the day, cheerful mother who is definitely not exhausted. Your children, still buzzing from dinner like tiny bees hopped up on rolls and chaos, gather around with wild, unfocused energy. One immediately climbs onto the armchair, pretending it's a mountain. The other decides the floor is lava. Neither has any indoor voice whatsoever. Your husband sits in his favourite recliner, newspaper in hand, looking serene, perhaps too serene, as though the surrounding pandemonium by a shell of masculine bliss. "Why don't we all play a game?" he suggests, offering an idea he will not actually participate in. You pull out a board game from the cabinet, ignoring the fact that the box is held together with tape and hope. Within seconds, the children argue over who gets which game piece, who cheated last time, and who is cheating now. You referee, your tone gentle but firm like a kindergarten teacher who hasn't slept since Christmas. Your toddler makes continuous sound effects, zooms, booms, beeps, honks, none of which relate to the game. They roll dice with the finesse of someone hurling stones at a medieval fortress. You gently remind them that dice are for rolling, not throwing, and retrieve one from beneath the sofa where it has joined a colony of missing objects. Meanwhile, the older child explains complicated rules they invented 5 seconds ago, insisting everyone must follow them. Your husband mutters from behind his newspaper, contributing nothing but ambience. You feel a small vein in your forehead pulse. You keep smiling. Next comes storytelling. Kids love stories, long ones, loud ones with sound effect your throat is too tired to make. You begin telling the harmless tale of a bunny going to the market, but within moments the children interrupt, turning the bunny into a superhero who fights bears, then a dragon, then possibly the US government. The story derails spectacularly. You let it happen. Improvisation is the backbone of family survival. Then comes drawing time. Paper is distributed. Crayons are shared. Chaos erupts because someone took the good red. You encourage kindness through clenched teeth and hand out backup reds that are not, apparently, good enough. Still, they draw lopsided houses, floating people, something that might be a dog or possibly a toaster, and you praise each masterpiece with the enthusiasm of an art curator unveiling a new exhibit. Your husband asks, "Everything okay over here?" in the tone of a man who hasn't fully looked up. You smile sweetly and say wonderful, while your oldest child uses a crayon to tattoo the coffee table. Bedtime edges closer. You feel it approaching the way sailors feel a distant breeze with hope. But the children, sensing weakness, rally for one final burst of chaos. They turn the living room into an obstacle course. Pillows fly. A blanket becomes a cape. Someone accidentally kicks over a stack of magazines, and the toddler laughs like a small, adorable villain. Still, there are moments of softness. The older child shows you a drawing with pride. The toddler snuggles briefly against your shoulder before wriggling away again. Your husband sets down the newspaper long enough to smile at the scene, not fully understanding the labour involved, but appreciating it all the same. And you sit there, holding the centre of the storm, creating warmth out of exhaustion, connection out of chaos, because family time is rarely peaceful, rarely calm, rarely picturesque, but it is real, loud, messy, human. And as the clock ticks closer to bedtime, you allow yourself one blissful thought. You made it through another evening, and soon blessed silence awaits. The children refuse sleep. They want water. They want stories. They want answers to existential questions. You're ready for unconsciousness. Bedtime in the 1950s is not a routine. It is a diplomatic summit, a psychological endurance trial, and a full contact sport rolled into one. You stand at the threshold of the hallway, clutching pajamas in one hand and a thin thread of patience in the other. Your children peer at you with gleaming eyes, sensing your fatigue like wolves scenting weakness. They know. They always know. You begin the ritual with a cheerful tone you absolutely do not feel. "All right, time for bed," you announce, as if announcing something delightful, like a snow day or a surprise pony. They respond by collapsing onto the floor in synchronized protest. You coax them upright, guiding them toward their bedroom with gentle herding motions usually reserved for migrating livestock. They toddle forward reluctantly, stopping every few steps to examine a speck of lint, a shadow on the wall, or a thought that suddenly occurred to them with life-changing intensity. Pajamas are next. This requires negotiations, distractions, and occasionally physical evasive maneuvers. The older one insists on wearing the pajamas with the ducks, even though they are in the laundry hamper and currently smell like forgotten hopes. The younger one runs naked through the hallway, screeching like a tiny joyful banshee. You catch them mid-sprint, wrestling them gently but firmly into their pajamas while maintaining a smile that's beginning to look unhinged. Once clothed, the children climb into bed but immediately pop back out, declaring they are thirsty. You hand them water. They take one sip and inform you the water tastes wrong. You consider asking them to define wrong, but you know that path leads only to confusion and sorrow. You fetch different water. It still tastes wrong. Next, stories. You open a picture book, settling into a reading voice that is calm, melodic, and dangerously close to your actual speaking voice after the day you've had. You begin reading about a gentle rabbit who visits his friends. The children interrupt immediately. One wants to know why the rabbit wears clothes. The other wants to know if rabbits pay taxes. You attempt answers that are both accurate and sleep-inducing. You resume reading. 2 sentences later, the toddler interrupts again with a question so cosmic it nearly knocks you over. Where were we before we were babies? You stare. You blink. You consider lying down on the floor. You offer a vague answer involving stars. They nod thoughtfully, as though evaluating your philosophical competence. Eventually you finish the story, triumphantly, like a marathon runner crossing the finish line while dragging both legs behind them. You tuck them in with blankets, smoothing their hair, dimming the lights. You whisper, "Good night," your voice full of warm finality. You turn to leave. Then it happens. Wait. One more thing. It is never one more thing. They need another stuffed animal, then another. They need you to adjust the blanket by exactly 2 inches. They need you to check the closet for monsters, the hallway for ghosts, the window for suspicious birds. You comply. You always comply. This is not because the fears make sense, they do not, but because you're too tired to argue. Finally, you tiptoe out, heart pounding as though navigating a minefield of creaky floorboards. You make it to the living room. You exhale. Freedom. Then a small voice pierces the silence. "Moom! I forgot to tell you something." You close your eyes. You consider faking your own disappearance. You return answer the question. No, you cannot become nocturnal and tuck them in again. And then, miraculously, unbelievably, silence takes hold. They sleep. Their small faces soften. Their breathing evens. In the glow of the nightlight they look peaceful, adorable, angelic. The same children who minutes ago weaponized existential dread to delay bedtime by 40 minutes. You watch them for a moment, the irritation melting into something softer, tender even. Exhausted, absolutely, but tender. You step out of the room, closing the door with the gentleness of a bomb technician. Negotiations complete. Ceasefire achieved, for now. You remove your makeup, brush your hair 100 strokes like magazines demand, and collapse into bed as your spine whispers its final goodbye. By the time you reach the bathroom, the house is finally mercifully quiet. No tiny footsteps, no clattering dishes, no one yelling your name with the urgency of a medical emergency, because they saw a shadow shaped like a spider. Just you, the soft hum of the bathroom light, and the faint scent of lavender soap that you bought specifically to trick your brain into thinking you live a peaceful life. You begin with your makeup. This morning, it took you 10 careful minutes to apply. Tonight, removal feels like a full archaeological excavation. You swipe cold cream across your cheeks, lifting away a day's worth of foundation, sweat, and emotional fortitude. The cream smears into a pale paste that makes you look like a Victorian ghost. But honestly, you're too tired to care. You wipe it off with a damp cloth, watching your real face re-emerge, softer, shinier, and carrying the invisible weight of 17 hours of unpaid labour. Next is your hair. Magazines insist that brushing your hair 100 strokes per night will give you shine, vitality, and possibly a better marriage. You suspect this claim was developed by someone who had both too much time and too much hair, but you attempt it anyway. You raise the brush and begin counting. 1, 2, 3. By 10 your shoulder aches. By 20 your eyes glaze over. By 30 you forget what number you're on and start again out of sheer moral obligation. Your curls, stiff with hairspray, fight back at first. Then slowly, reluctantly, they surrender. With each stroke the day's stress lifts a fraction, a small fraction, but still. You keep brushing until your hair lies flat, glossy, obedient, and very possibly plotting revenge for the morning. You check your reflection. You're no longer the pleasant yet tense woman who hosted dinner, mediated sibling rivalries, and negotiated bedtime treaties. You're now a softer, quieter version of yourself, one who is almost ready for rest. You slip into your nightgown, a garment made entirely of fabric that somehow manages to feel both too thin and too scratchy. The moment it touches your skin, your entire body sighs like a collapsing building. You stretch your back gently, hearing one vertebrae make a noise that suggests retirement is imminent. The bedroom is dim when you walk in, lit only by a small lamp that casts warm amber across the sheets. You pull back the covers, sliding into bed with the heavy grace of someone who has been awake for approximately 3 centuries. The mattress embraces you with a soft thump, and your spine, faithful companion, long-suffering hero, whispers, "Finally." Your husband lies beside you, already snoring quietly, because his ability to fall asleep instantly remains one of life's great injustices. You watch his peaceful face and debate whether gently nudging him counts as an act of love or an act of war. You decide to let him sleep, mostly because waking him would require movement, and movement is no longer on the menu. You attempt a few pages of a book, something light and escapist. But after one paragraph, your eyes droop. The words blur together. You close the book and place it on the nightstand where it will remain untouched for several weeks despite your best intentions. You nestle into your pillow, taking a slow, deep breath. Your muscles unwind, your heartbeat steadies. The quiet around you deepens, wrapping you in the kind of stillness you've been chasing since sunrise. For the first time all day, no one needs you. No one is calling your name. No one is asking impossible questions about rabbits and taxes. Just you, your bed, and the sweet, fragile promise of sleep. Your mind floats gently, pleasantly, dipping toward the foggy edges of dreams. The last thought you have before drifting under is simple, profound, and true. You survived another day, and tomorrow somehow, impossibly, you'll do it again. Just as you close your eyes, you remember the laundry you forgot, the dishes still soaking, and the school bake sale tomorrow. You sigh. Welcome to the loop. It washes over you slowly at first, that creeping awareness that domestic life is less a schedule and more a cosmic cycle, a loop, a repeating, level in a video game that hasn't been invented yet. You lie there beneath the blankets, warm and exhausted, your eyelids growing heavy, and then your brain taps your shoulder like an overly cheerful co-worker saying, "Quick question. The laundry, the dishes, the bake sale, the guilt, the mental to-do list that regenerates like a hydra." Your eyes snap back open, and the ceiling greets you with the indifferent stare of someone who has witnessed countless women realize the exact same thing. The day is never truly over. Not in the 1950s, not in your house, not with your family. You try to convince yourself it's fine. You can do the laundry in the morning. Sure, it will smell slightly swampy by then, but that is future you's problem, and future you is much more capable, probably. You picture the soaking dishes in the sink, bloating quietly in their stale water like little shipwreck survivors waiting for rescue. You whisper a tiny apology to them. They do not respond. Then there's the bake sale, the one you definitely did not volunteer for but were somehow assigned anyway, because someone at the PTA insists you always make the best cookies, even though your last batch was so hard a child used one as a skipping stone. You mentally sort through your pantry, recalling the flour level, low, the sugar level, also low, and your will to live, respectable but fragile. You begin planning tomorrow's early morning baking session, which will inevitably involve you frantically mixing batter while your children ask existential questions about oven heat. You sink deeper into your pillow, trying to push these thoughts aside but more appear. You remember the sewing repair you promised your husband, the closet that needs reorganizing, the phone call you forgot to return, the coupon that expires tomorrow, the leftover casserole you swore you'd freeze but forgot to. It snowballs. It always snowballs. You shift under the covers trying to find that perfect sleeping position where your body stops buzzing with responsibility. You stretch your legs, you tuck your arm under the pillow, you adjust the blanket 3 times, you close your eyes again, and your brain floods you with one more reminder. The children's school picture day is Friday. You gasp softly as though assaulted. Beside you, your husband snores peacefully, drifting through dreams unburdened by the cognitive chaos swirling in your mind. You watch him for a moment, marveling at the simplicity of masculine sleep. You briefly consider poking him awake to share your emotional spiral, but decide against it. He can deal with his responsibilities, shaving and walking out the door in the morning. You take a slow breath, willing your thoughts to calm. You remind yourself that not everything must be done tonight. You've handled days worse than this one. You've conquered grocery trips with toddlers, surprise guests, laundry revolts, vacuum uprisings, and casseroles that fought back. You are, after all, the quiet backbone of this household, the woman who keeps everything from collapsing through sheer determination and caffeine fumes. And slowly, the tension in your shoulders loosens. Not all the way, but enough. You remind yourself that tomorrow will come just like today did. Messy, loud, relentless, and strangely full of moments worth laughing about later. The loop is exhausting, yes, but also familiar, predictable in its unpredictability. A rhythm you've learned to navigate with grace and humour. Your breathing deepens, your muscles soften. The thoughts drift farther away, as though your mind is finally deciding to clock out for the night. And as you hover at the edge of sleep, half dreaming, half thinking, the last realization settles warmly over you. You'll do it all again tomorrow. And somehow, impossibly, you'll survive that day too. You sit at the kitchen table with a stack of bills, a pencil, and a ledger that looks like it was designed by someone who hates joy. Your husband expects the household budget to balance itself, and you're expected to stretch a dollar so far it practically screams. You stare at the numbers until they blur, wondering how your entire life became a math problem with no correct answers. The kitchen is dim, lit only by a small lamp with a crooked shade that casts judgmental shadows across the table. The children are finally asleep. The house is silent, and here you are, engaging in the nightly ritual that every 1950s housewife knows too well. Magical, increasingly desperate arithmetic. You open the ledger. The lines are tiny. The margins are stern. The paper is yellowed from years of anxiety. Your handwriting wobbles from fatigue as you record the latest grocery total, which feels more like the national debt than the cost of milk and canned peas. You flip to the next page, a depressing chronicle of financial gymnastics, and stare down at numbers that refuse to cooperate. You pick up your pencil and begin subtracting. Gas bill, electric bill, phone bill, the surprise plumber bill from last week when the sink decided to imitate a geyser. Each number hits the page with a soft, traitorous thud. You erase, rewrite, erase again. Your eraser sheds tiny pink crumbs that sprinkle across the ledger like confetti celebrating your suffering. Domestic finances in the 1950s are a cruel paradox. You're expected to manage all expenditures flawlessly using none of the actual money. Your husband hands you the week's cash with a breezy "should be enough," then wanders off, unaware of the fiscal tightrope you walk daily. Should be enough. As though money were a suggestion. As though inflation, children, appliances, and random disasters all politely take turns. You attempt to calculate how many meals you can produce from the remnants of last week's budget. You consider whether it's socially acceptable to serve casseroles every night for the next 3 months. You wonder how many creative uses of leftover roast exist before it becomes a crime. You flip through the recipe cards for inspiration, but all they offer is mayonnaise-based despair. You bend over the ledger again, pen tapping, heart sinking. Every category is too high, every margin too thin. You shift a few numbers around, adjusting the grocery allotment downward by a hopeful and unrealistic amount. You erase the entertainment budget entirely, as if you have time or energy for entertainment. You reduce the clothing allowance for the children even though they seem to outgrow their shoes every 12 hours. Eventually you begin the oldest housewife budgeting trick in the book, rounding. Rounding so aggressively it borders on fiction. You turn $7.89 into $7. Close enough, you whisper, pretending the universe will applaud your optimism. You lop off cents like a financial lumberjack, convincing yourself that if the numbers look smaller, maybe the bills themselves will shrink out of pity. Half an hour passes, maybe an hour. Time loses shape. Your coffee has gone cold. Your pencil is down to a stub. You rub your temples and imagine a life where someone else handles the math. A life where dollars behave, appliances don't revolt, and budgeting doesn't feel like preparing for battle. Then you reach the end of the ledger line, the moment of truth. You total everything. You hold your breath. You add the columns. Your eyes blur from exhaustion, but you keep going, And the result? Negative. Obviously negative. You stare at the number, emotionless, as if looking at an old enemy you've learned to tolerate. You consider crying but decide you're too tired. You consider laughing but worry you'll sound unhinged. Instead, you close the ledger gently, place your hand on its worn cover and whisper, "Tomorrow. I'll try again tomorrow." Because that is what 1950s housewives do. They stretch, patch, fudge, rework, and rearrange until the impossible looks possible enough to get through another week. You stack the bills neatly, gather the crumbs of your eraser, and turn off the kitchen lamp. The room falls back into darkness, and as you walk toward your bedroom, the ledger still whispering guilt behind you, one truth settles in your chest. You're not failing. You're performing miracles with numbers that refuse to cooperate, and tomorrow you'll perform them again. The doorbell rings. It's your neighbour, who just happened to be passing by but is clearly here to inspect the state of your living room. In the 1950s, neighbourhood relationships are a blend of friendship, espionage, and competitive hospitality. You smile sweetly while wondering if she noticed the dust bunny currently hiding under the couch like a fugitive. You open the door with the bright, controlled smile of a woman who absolutely did not sprint from the kitchen to straighten the throw pillows in, the exact 3 seconds between the knock and the moment you turn the handle. Your neighbour stands there in her floral dress, hair perfectly curled, lipstick pristine, holding a Tupperware container just returned from a casserole exchange that may or may not have occurred 6 months ago. She steps inside without waiting for an invitation, a normal 1950s courtesy, apparently, and immediately scans the room like a customs agent assessing contraband. "Everything looks lovely," she chirps, which you know translates loosely to, "I see the crumbs under the coffee table, but I'm choosing to save that gossip for later." You usher her to the couch, praying the dust bunny army below remains dormant. As she sits, her eyes dart discreetly to the corners, the shelves, the end tables, every surface that could reveal whether you are thriving or merely surviving. Your heartbeat quickens as she leans forward. Is she admiring your floral wallpaper? Or did she spot the faint stain from the time your toddler used applesauce as interior paint? You offer her coffee because of course you must. Hospitality is mandatory, and she accepts with the graciousness of a queen receiving tribute. You rush to the kitchen, reheating the morning's leftover pot, because brewing new coffee would take too long, and you have mere seconds before she begins mentally documenting your cabinetry. Coffee in hand, you return to the living room, where she's now inspecting your bookshelf with the intensity of an archaeologist deciphering ancient runes. "Oh, you read these kinds of books," she remarks. You have no idea what that means, but you nod anyway, silently wishing you'd hidden the dime novels behind the Encyclopedia Britannicas like you planned. She sips the coffee, grimaces slightly, it is after all 11 hours old, yet assures you it's just delightful. You sit across from her, perched carefully on the sofa's edge, clutching your own lukewarm cup as a prop for normalcy. Then begins the ritual of polite surveillance conversation. She compliments your curtains while tugging at them to check for dust. She admires your new lamp while discreetly lifting the doily beneath it to examine the table's polish. She asks about your children while inspecting the floor for toys that might indicate a chaotic household. Each question feels like a tiny, sugar-coated interrogation. And you, ever the dutiful 1950s housewife, answer graciously while subtly angling your body to block her line of sight to the overflowing laundry basket peeking through the hall. She shares neighbourhood updates next. Who repainted their shutters? Whose hydrangeas are struggling? Who bought a dishwasher? A luxury so shocking she whispers it like a confession. You nod empathetically, pretending these revelations are riveting while internally calculating how long you must endure before it's polite to escort her out. At one point she compliments your housekeeping with a smile, so loaded it could pass for a coded threat. Everything looks wonderfully tidy, she coos, eyes glancing toward that one rebellious dust bunny. You feel the urge to kick it deeper under the couch, but you resist. Eventually, finally, she stands to leave. You walk her to the door, maintaining cheerful small talk as she steps onto the porch. She waves goodbye with a bright smile that masks the data she's collected. You wave back with one that masks your mild panic. When the door closes, you exhale wildly, sagging against the wall in relief. You've survived another episode of neighborhood polite surveillance, the era's most enduring spectator sport. You glance under the couch. The dust bunny stares back. Not today, little friend. Not today. You attend your local PTA meeting, hoping to blend into the wallpaper. Instead, you're immediately volunteered to run the bake sale, organise the spring pageant, and possibly stitch new curtains for the school auditorium. Everyone smiles, politely while quietly panicking about their assigned duties, including you, especially you. The PTA meeting takes place in the school's multi-purpose room, also known as the cafeteria, gymnasium and venue for any event requiring a folding chair. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like judgmental bees as you take a cautious seat in the back row, clutching your notebook like a talisman. You fold your hands neatly, willing yourself to invisibility. You have high hopes for this meeting, or rather, one high hope, to leave it with zero responsibilities. This hope evaporates in under 30 seconds. The PTA president, a woman with a voice trained in the art of cheerful intimidation, welcomes everyone with a dazzling smile. "Thank you all for being here," she says, in a tone suggesting she has your attendance recorded in a secret ledger. She launches into announcements, each one more elaborate than the last. Fundraiser totals, teacher requests, supply shortages, the ongoing mystery of who keeps unplugging the overhead projector. Then she begins assigning tasks, not requesting volunteers, assigning. Her eyes sweep the room like a lighthouse searching for lost ships. You look down, pretending to study your notebook, but it is too late. She spots you. "Ah, and you can run the bake sale." You blink. You hadn't even introduced yourself yet. Before you can protest, she continues, "and we'll need you to coordinate publicity for the spring pageant. Oh, and perhaps stitch some new curtains. You seem like the crafty type." You do not, in fact, seem like the crafty type. You once glued your fingers together attempting to make a paper snowflake. But in the PTA universe, reality is secondary to enthusiasm, and you are assigned these tasks with the confidence of a general distributing battle orders. Around the room, other parents receive their assignments like conscripts drafted into domestic war. Mrs. Thompson is tasked with organising the car wash since your boys are so energetic. Mr. Lewis is told he will design the pageant programme because you have such neat handwriting. Every face smiles tightly while their souls quietly exit their bodies. The meeting continues, charts are shown, budgets are discussed. Everyone nods sagely as if they understand the school's financial report, which is written entirely in numbers that appear to have been shuffled for sport. You scribble notes even though none of your notes will help you sew curtains for an auditorium the size of a small cathedral. Then comes the open discussion portion, the most dangerous part. This is where innocent questions transform into lifelong commitments. Someone mentions needing more decorations for the spring pageant. Someone else says the bake sale tables are getting old. Before you can hide, the room turns to look at you again. Maybe you could make new tablecloths. You smile as if this is the best idea you've ever heard, and not the 11th new responsibility handed to you in under an hour. Your pencil trembles. When the meeting finally adjourns, everyone stands and murmurs polite goodbyes, walking slowly, like survivors leaving the site of a controlled explosion. You gather your belongings with the dazed expression of someone who just discovered she has been elected mayor of a town she didn't know existed. The PTA president pats your arm sweetly, oblivious to your inner spiraling. So glad you're part of our little team. You step outside into the cool evening air, gulping it like freedom. You look up at the sky, wondering how one woman is supposed to run a bake sale, build a pageant, sew curtains, and still manage dinner tomorrow night. You laugh softly, that slightly manic laugh used exclusively by mothers and field medics, because you know you will somehow get it done. Because in the 1950s, PTA meetings are less about participation and more about surrender. And tonight, you surrendered beautifully. As the sun dips low, you prepare your husband's nightly cocktail, a ritual as sacred as any religious practice in the 50s. You hand him a drink that could knock out a small horse while sipping your own Just soda that has mysteriously started tasting more like gin each day. You smile politely at the television while the air fills with unspoken exhaustion. In the 1950s, cocktail hour is less a pleasant tradition and more a cultural obligation performed with the gravity of a state ceremony. As the clock strikes 5, a hush settles over the house. Not because the children calm down, they don't, or because the chores are finished, they aren't, but because it is time. Cocktail time. Sacred time. If there were a national anthem for it, you would be forced to stand. You take out the shaker, which clinks with a metallic cheerfulness that your body does not share. You fill it with ice, cracking cubes that sound like brittle bones, and reach for the bottles lined neatly on the shelf. Your husband claims to prefer just a splash, but his definition of a splash is roughly equivalent to the volume of a small lake. You pour, swirl and mix like a mid-century chemist crafting a potion designed to numb the day. He settles into his chair, one leg crossed casually, as if he's just returned from slaying dragons rather than sitting in an office chair for most of the afternoon. You hand him the glass, and he takes it with the reverence of a man receiving ancient wisdom. He sighs after the first sip, a sound so satisfied you momentarily forget that you too are a human with inner complexity and emotional needs. You return to the kitchen and pour your own drink, just soda, because that is what a proper 1950s housewife drinks. But it's getting harder to ignore that this soda has acquired a little extra courage each evening. You pretend not to notice the gin that happened to slip in when you accidentally tipped the bottle too far. You stir it gently, as if blending secrets, into the fizz. The children run through the living room in a blur of energy, one wearing a blanket as a cape, the other dragging a wooden toy that makes a clacking sound threatening to break your spirit. Your husband doesn't flinch. He stares at television, absorbed in whatever news program or detective show flickers in grainy black and white wonder. Occasionally he chuckles. You stare too, not because you enjoy the program, but because staring at the screen feels easier than acknowledging how heavy your own bones feel. The air fills with a comfortable, quiet kind of tired. Not the peaceful kind, no. This is the weighty exhaustion that sits beside you on the couch and places a hand on your shoulder like an old friend whispering, "We're doing our best." You nurse your drink slowly, letting the bubbles tickle your lip, letting the faint heat melt into your chest. You pretend your soda is refreshing. You pretend the gin is merely a rumour. Your husband lifts his glass for another sip and says, "You should relax more," as though relaxation is a switch you forgot to flip this morning. You smile at him, a smile honed over years of unspoken compromise, and take another polite sip of your drink. The gin warms you as you look at the television, neither listening nor caring, simply allowing your mind to drift like a tired balloon. The sun finishes its descent, painting the room in soft twilight. Lamps flick on, shadows settle. The children finally quiet down, their chaotic orbits slowing into something resembling calm. Your husband reaches the bottom of his drink and sighs again, content and oblivious. You take a final sip of your own drink, lighter, fizzier, stronger than you'd ever admit, and rise from the couch. The evening chores wait, the night stretches ahead, and tomorrow the ritual will repeat itself. Because in the 1950s, cocktails aren't just beverages, they're coping mechanisms poured into crystal glasses and served with polite smiles, and you, resourceful, exhausted, quietly powerful, have mastered the art of pretending your soda is just soda. It's beauty night, the one evening dedicated to curling, plucking, filing, polishing, and applying enough cold cream to resemble a frosted donut. Beauty magazines tell you this routine is relaxing. Your pores, however, tell a different story. You sit patiently, hair encased in rollers that weigh more than your vacuum cleaner, hoping glamour will magically emerge through the discomfort. Beauty night begins with optimism. You tell yourself that this will be the week you finally achieve the glossy, effortless look promised by every magazine ad featuring women who have servants, free time, and possibly no actual pores. You gather your supplies, cold cream, bobby pins, rollers, nail files, eyebrow tweezers, lotion that smells vaguely medicinal, and spread them across your vanity like tools for a ritual sacrifice. Step 1. The cold cream. You scoop out a generous dollop and smear it across your face until you glisten like a pastry in a bakery display. The cream is cool, thick, and slightly sticky, clinging to your skin in a way that feels both soothing and suffocating. Magazines say it invigorates your complexion, but it mostly just makes you wonder what you ever did to deserve such a damp, slippery fate. Then you tackle your eyebrows. With the tweezers poised like tiny metal torture devices, you pluck each hair with the precision of a jeweler and the agony of someone being repeatedly stung by invisible hornets. Your eyes water, your nose tingles, your soul momentarily leaves your body. Beauty is pain, the magazines whisper. You respond internally. Beauty is exhausting. Your hair, meanwhile, sits rolled tightly against your scalp, each curler pulling at your roots with quiet vengeance. The rollers are enormous, the size of small artillery equipment, and somehow heavy enough to alter the tilt of your head. When you move, they clatter, softly like chains, fitting. Considering beauty night does feel a bit like stylish imprisonment. You smooth a setting lotion over them that smells like old flowers and determination, hoping it will somehow coax your hair into a manageable shape by morning. Next comes the manicure, an ordeal far more complicated than it seems. You file your nails while holding your hands at unnatural angles like a ballerina caught in mid-pose. The tiny grains fall onto your lap, mixing with the cold cream flakes now shedding from your cheeks. Then you paint your nails in a shade called Rose Elegance, which looks glamorous in the bottle, but turns into streaky bubblegum accident on your actual fingers. As the polish dries, you hold your hands out stiffly, unable to touch anything. Not the vanity, not the chair, not your own face, even though the cold cream has begun to slide southward. A single errant itch appears on your cheek. You cannot scratch it. You breathe through the discomfort like a monk, achieving enlightenment. And then, of course, there's the hairdryer. This hulking tabletop contraption, shaped like an industrial helmet, blasts hot air onto your scalp with the subtlety of a jet engine. You sit beneath it, rollers baking, cold cream melting, eyebrows throbbing, hands frozen mid-air. The noise is so loud it drowns out your thoughts, which might actually be the most relaxing part of the evening. When the dryer finally clicks off, you exhale with relief. You unwrap each roller with the care of someone disarming bombs. Some curls spring beautifully, others kink sideways in open rebellion. A few lie limp, uncooperative, as if to say, "Nice try." You rearrange, pin, fluff, and pray. By the end of beauty night, you look better. Not glamorous exactly, not cover girl radiant, but softened, polished, presentable, Like a woman who's endured mild suffering in the name of societal expectations and lived to tell the tale, you wash your hands carefully, avoiding smudging the still tacky polish. You wipe away the cold cream, revealing skin that feels strangely reborn. You remove the stray hair clinging to your cheek, a casualty of the earlier eyebrow battle. You catch your reflection in the mirror and nod. Tomorrow, with luck, your curls will hold, your eyebrows will be even, your skin will glow. But for now, you turn off the bathroom light, silently grateful that beauty night only comes once a week. So tonight, as you gently drift towards sleep, think back on your very full, very exhausting day as a 1950s housewife, a day packed with casseroles, carpets, cooking, cleaning, and enough smiling through the pain to qualify you for an Olympic medal in emotional endurance. You woke before dawn, armed yourself with hairspray and hope, juggled children, groceries, gossip, and appliances that seemed only half tamed, and you still somehow managed to serve dinner with a polite grin. It's funny, isn't it? For all the pastel-coloured advertisements, promising effortless bliss. Life in the 1950s demanded more from one woman in a day than most of us handle in a week. And beneath the polished surface, beneath the pearls, the lipstick, the perfect meringues, lived a quiet strength that kept entire families stitched together. Because surviving that world required genius disguised as routine, creative budgets, emotional diplomacy, culinary improvisation, and patience so vast it could rival the Grand Canyon. Women held households, neighborhoods, even entire communities together with grace, stubbornness, and a kind of everyday heroism history still doesn't fully appreciate. So as you settle deeper under your blankets, maybe take a moment to feel grateful for the small modern miracles gently humming around you. The dishwasher quietly finishing its cycle, the washing machine that doesn't threaten bodily harm, the takeout app that saves your sanity on nights when you'd rather not cook, the heater keeping your toes warm without requiring you to chop wood or bank embers like some domestic dragon. And whisper a quiet thank you to the women who came before, the ones who endured pressure, expectations and relentless workloads while still finding moments to laugh, breathe, dream, and hope. Their resilience built the foundation of the world we live in now. One load of laundry, one packed lunch, one perfectly timed deep breath at a time. Because history isn't just grand battles or royal scandals, it's the quiet strength of ordinary people doing extraordinary things to hold life together. And those 1950s housewives. They were warriors in aprons, fighting invisible wars with love, grit, and casserole dishes that refused to die. So rest easy tonight. Let the weight of modern comfort wrap around you, and drift off knowing that even in the chaos of your own life, you're doing just fine, far better, perhaps, than you give yourself credit for. Sleep well, my friend. You've earned it.